Okay, we're recording.
Okay. Right.
We're recording. It's Wrong Speed Record Chat number 43. And we have Simon from Newport. Hello, Simon.
Hi, Joe. Nice to be here. Thanks very
doing?
much for asking me.
How are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. Man of my age, you know, not too bad at all.
And so you're in Newport, correct?
Yep, or the port as it's known to us locals.
The port. And that is not where you were born.
No. Well, I was born in London, but left there. My father was a civil servant, so he tended to get sort of posted all over the place. So I spent time in Hampshire and Lancashire and that, and finished up in sort of North Gloucestershire, South Worcestershire, which is where, if I've got any accent left, that's mainly where it comes from, is sort of a bit of Gloucestershire and that. So spent most of my formative years there, if you like.
All right.
So before decamping to the port. The port.
And so, am I right in thinking that you moved to Newport because you were running a record shop?
Yeah. When we opened the shop, we were still living in Gloucestershire. We were living in Stroud at that time. And we developed a sort of mail order, a very primitive mail order record business with some friends of ours. And we used to occasionally just jump in the car on a day off from work and head off to all sorts of really random sort of places to look round markets and secondhand record shops and junk shops and that, buying records to sell in the mail order. And we came to Newport and there wasn't anywhere really to buy records. So that sort of stuck on the back burner. And then sometime later, after we'd amassed quite a lot of unsold sort of stock, and we thought, well, what the hell are we going to do with this? It was like, Newport. So the sylvan voices of Newport called us in. so we opened the shop while still living in Stroud. And so obviously that involved like about a 90-mile daily round trip commute, which was a bit of a pain. And then when we had our daughter in 1983, it became even more ridiculous. I just resented the sort of couple of hours a day I was spending like basically in queues on the Severn Bridge. We moved into Newport in 84.
Right, yeah, 84. And the name of the record shop?
Rockaway Records.
Rockaway Records.
Yeah.
And how have I met you?
Spot the Ramones influence there.
And so it's how I've met you though, is because you now, what are we, 35 years on?
Yeah, more than that.
You seem to run all of the record fairs in the whole of the southwest of England and the south of Wales, correct?
Well, I run quite a lot of them as a proportion, I suppose. But that's not because I've gone round taking out all the other organisers or taking out contracts on them. Basically, I came to record fair organising quite late.
Right.
And most of the sort of larger cities already had pre-existing record fairs. So I was sort of sidelined, if you like, down to the sort of the smaller towns. And really, nobody much wants to bother with those sort of places. I love working in them.
Yeah, well, for me, so I live in the middle of Somerset, in case anyone doesn't know. And our nearest record shop of any note is either Frome, which is about 45-minute drive away, or I've got to go up to Bristol, which is an hour plus.
Yeah.
So I'd say, what, 2 or 3 times a year, maybe?
3 times, we usually do, yeah.
3 times a year you come to Wells, which is a tiny, tiny little city about 5 miles from me. And I love it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's a pleasure to come and walk around Wells and do all the fly posting for the fair and that as well. I made several pacts with myself many moons ago, largely as a result of coming from my sort of punk rock background, if you like. And one of those pacts was that I wouldn't work in towns that I didn't like.
Oh, okay.
And that's why Weston-super-Mare doesn't have a record fair, but Wells does.
good.
So, yeah, I mean,
here's a question then, because you talk about sticking up the posters and whatnot. Okay, I was in Barnstable a couple of days ago, and I saw a poster for one of your record fairs down there.
Yeah.
Which is happening like in about a week's time. And I thought to myself, how does Simon put these posters up in these towns when he lives in Newport? What's the story there?
Well, I go down and do it. I post it. I do all the advertising that's not online, all the physical advertising. I look after myself. So when we've got a fair in Penzance, I do a 400-mile round trip to put up a load of posters around Penzance and road signs and that. And similarly, in unlikely places like the Isle of Wight, I get on a ferry and go across and spend the day on the Isle of Wight about a fortnight before the fair, getting posters and road signs up, to let people know, because I firmly believe that that's a very important way of getting events across to people. They don't just reside online, although obviously you need to do that as well, but they need to exist in the physical world.
Okay, that was blowing my mind.
Yeah, people think I'm stupid, and it's maybe it's not too far from the truth, but it works. It works.
I'm not going to say stupid, but I would say like enthusiastic. Like that's because I just assumed you had like a local pal. Well,
no, I don't. I mean, many people over the years have made that offer so that I could avoid actually doing it myself. There are several reasons why I don't. First of all, what's more pleasant than having a gentle stroll around somewhere like Wells or Barnstable, putting up a few posters for the day and stopping and having a cup of coffee every now and again and just taking in, the town. And the other thing is that it is actually illegal, most of what I do like that. Although I don't normally get an awful lot of trouble. But what I wouldn't want to happen was for some sort of customer from the fair to take it on themselves to do all that work, and for them either to be sort of caught doing it or to be fingered in some way or another, and for them to get into trouble for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I desperately try and not hide behind people. If there's any shit going, that comes to me, and that's the only way really that you can guarantee that.
Oh, that's blown my mind, because the reason I found out about the record fair was through a poster, and it wasn't even in Wells. I was in Shepton Mallet, which is where I work.
Yeah, that's right. Well, for the Wells fair, I poster in Cheddar, Wells, Shepton, and Glastonbury.
Yeah,
I get posters up in all those towns because they're, well, as you know, they're the sort of the reasonably accessible sort of satellite towns for Wells.
Yeah.
So you've got to let people know it's on.
Okay, that is
it's an increasingly hard battle basically you've got to win time from people for them to come to the event, as well as winning money off them, if you like, when they get there. So, and you can't have one without the other.
Yeah. So to confirm, there, Rockaway. If you want to find it on Facebook, it's Rockaway Record Fairs.
Rockaway Record Fairs. Yeah, and you'll see we've got a Tumblr page and a Facebook page as well. And you can find out all the dates that you need to and all the venue details and that on both of those pages. So yeah,
I definitely do. Especially if you're in the southwest, because there ain't nothing else. There's no other music shops. You've got, and actually there's. So I did just for the hell of it. These are the last two things I bought from you. No, actually, I got the last thing I bought from you and the best ever thing I bought from you.
Right.
Okay. So the last thing I bought from you was the Soul Jazz Black Riot compilation.
Oh yeah.
Which I absolutely love this compilation.
There's some great stuff on there, isn't there?
All Soul Jazz compilations are pretty interesting.
Yeah, they do a very, very good job indeed.
Yeah, apart from, and Simon Keeler will be watching, apart from the Seattle grunge one, which sucked. Simon. Belly Jungle, Raven Hardcore, brilliant compilation. Yeah. And this is one of my favourite ever records, and I was really pleased that Mr. Bongo reissued it. And it's the Arthur Verchai.
Oh right, the Arthur Verchai. Yeah. Yeah. I sold quite a lot of those. It had such good write-ups everywhere when it got reissued. Because it's a name that most people wouldn't know. So it's exactly an exact example of the sort of things you can pick up from good music journalism and that.
Yeah.
And what a treat when you do.
Yeah, it's really, really brilliant, and there he is conducting his orchestra. It's fantastic record. People need to check it the hell out. So you're putting up posters, and you've got that from the punk rock world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So when you were in Newport, you started putting on shows. Tell us about when that started.
Right. Well, it started as I've already.
And why?
Yeah. Well, as I've already said, we moved into Newport in '84, and those of you either with an historical bent or a long memory, depending, will realise that that's when the miners' strike started. Started in '84, went on to '85, okay. And in the lead up to that, when it was looking obvious there was going to be like a pretty well make or break dispute between the miners and the government, we had, as customers in the shop, we had quite a lot of customers that were sort of left-leaning, and a fair number of those that were actually members of sort of left of centre parties. And it was the big topic of discussion. And when the miners came out on strike, almost straight away, Pete, a guy called Pete, was working in the shop with me and myself, started prodding these people to say, right, okay, well, what are you going to do about this? These guys are looking like they're going to be out for the long term. Thatcher's not going to cave in sort of instantaneously, sort of thing. So there's a long job of work to be done here. And it's not sufficient to just go and stand on a picket line, for which there was no need in South Wales because virtually no miners went back. So it was a token gesture. And they just got in the way and made themselves, they weren't doing anything positive. So we were saying to them, look, these guys are going to be, in a minute, they're going to be selling their furniture. They're going to be buying candles because their electricity is going to get cut off. So what we think you guys need to do, because you're the ones with the axe to grind and you're the ones that will benefit from the political capital if the miners win, you need to sustain them during the strike. You need to put food on their tables. You need to pay their bills. And we, much to my chagrin, we got absolutely nowhere with these people. Absolutely nowhere. Right. So in the end, we had a conversation in the shop between about half a dozen of us. Just, well, we're going to have to do something then. If we can't make the people that are going to benefit from it, if we can't make them do something, then we've got to do it, because these guys, from our standpoint, they've got to win, or at least if they're going to lose, we've got to support them until they lose. And the only thing that we could think of, and the only thing that we had any minor expertise in at all, was music and gigs. Anne and I had organised a few things when we lived in Stroud for sort of an agitprop group to stop the council demolishing the high street. So we had some basic idea that you needed a venue, you needed a band, and you needed a PA, and you needed some sort of a promotion machine. So we started up what very quickly morphed into an outfit called Cheap Sweaty Fun, which is a bit onomatopoeic, really, in that we set out for it to be exactly what it was called. And bizarrely enough, that sort of ended up rolling on for 23 years, I think. So, and even had a brief resurgence in 2018, or was it 2019, perhaps 2019, I think, for a couple more gigs. So, we just got stuck in, basically, and did what others should have done.
Yeah, can you remember the first one?
The first one, I think Cheap Sweaty Fun didn't actually come into existence until we'd done about 3 gigs, I think, because they were done on the most amateurish sort of arrangements you could ever imagine, sort of thing. The first poster was done with like felt tip pens and this, that, and the other, and it was local bands. It was a local band called the Abs, right. that later on mutated into Dr. Bison, and they were around for quite a long time. And it was just local bands, sort of thing. We had access to a really great venue in Newport called the Stowhill Labour Club, which a punk band from Cumbraen called Impact had sort of discovered that you could actually hire the place and get gigs going in there, sort of thing. So we jumped in on there, sort of thing, and started doing things there. and it just mushroomed really from there. Before we knew where we were or what we were doing, we were putting on bands that were sort of way up the scale from where we thought we'd ever be. Not exactly household names, but in our little world, bands that were admirable.
Yeah, I've got a pile of records here of gigs that I think you put bands on for. We'll go
right.
Yeah. So, but talk to me about TJ's, the venue, because it's quite legendary in its own way.
Yeah. I mean, it was John Peel that christened it the legendary TJ's, and of course John Sicolo, who owned the venue, wasted no time at all in putting up a big sign outside. He took down the TJ's sign and put one up saying the legendary TJ's. But yeah, it was. I think if you what happened was that the labour clubs, of which there were about 6 in Newport, and we used the Stow Hill Labour Club mainly, but we also used the Pill Labour Club if we needed a bigger venue. In common with all sort of working man's social clubs in South Wales, we're going through a really hard time, sort of thing, and they ended up pretty well. I think only one of them is still left now, sort of thing. So they ended up all closing down. So yeah, we had to find another home, really, and we did a couple of gigs in Newport Centre, upstairs in a small room, and then we fell into what was at that time known as El Seco's. Okay. Which changed its name to TJ's fairly shortly afterwards, sort of thing. And that was our home for probably 20 years. And then towards the end of that time, if we had sort of bigger gigs, they were in TJ's, and smaller gigs we did in Le Pub in Caxton Place as well. So we were using the 2 venues in parallel. Sort of thing. But yeah, TJ's owned by John and Trilby, which is where the T and the J comes from. All right. Both sadly no longer with us, sort of thing. But they really jumped in, and we couldn't have done what we did really without them. They were so accommodating, and when I think of some of the scenes that took place inside the club that had their names over the door, they must have been very much into it. Otherwise they'd have just thrown us out years before.
Well, hopefully we'll get to some of that stuff.
yeah, probably.
I know, like playing in a band like in London at the time or whatever, it was one of my ambitions was to play in Newport. It was one of those places where it's like, okay, TJ's, that's we there's a few venues in the UK. It was like 1 in 12 in Bradford. Always wanted to play there. There was a few dotted around, and TJ's is always one, or Newport, essentially. For some reason.
Entirely by accident.
Yeah, well, it just had a light over it, like some form of musical mecca-y sort of place that we thought, okay, we did end up playing there. We played at and irritatingly, I can't remember if it was TJ's or Le Pub. It would have been 2006.
Right.
I don't know if TJ's was still there then.
Yeah, it was, because we were still doing gigs in 2007. So I think it probably shut down in about 2008, 2009, something like that. So it might well have been. Do you remember if you went upstairs, or was it on the street level?
Oh, I got to think it was street level.
That was TJ's then.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So was that with Hey Colossus?
Yeah.
It was it?
Yeah, we played with I want to say the Bronx. It was either the Bronx or the other band that the Bronx did with the same people.
Oh, Bronx Mariachi.
No. Oh no. It will come to me. It was for some reason they sounded like the Bronx, and it was the same people in the Bronx. Right. And it was even on the same label, but for some reason they had a different name.
Right.
And because we played at the Garage in London and in Newport with them.
Right.
Come to me over the course of this chat. The name will.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't make that, because I'd have been into you guys earlier than I was. So my apologies for not being there.
I don't think you missed much. No, I won't worry about that.
Well,
But yeah, so it was always a place we wanted to play, and I'm guessing it was mainly down to you and your crew.
Well, there was lots of other people it was very much an open act. We never had any sort of exclusive deal there or anything. And basically anybody that wanted to be a promoter in Newport had access to the place. Admittedly, John occasionally gave us priority sort of thing because we were bringing in out of town bands, so that if there was a local band playing, I mean, sometimes we used to put them on as a support act to a touring band if that was suitable. Sometimes, though, as you know, it works out as a package thing and you can't really sort of do that. But then John would give them another date sort of thing, you know, and that, you know. But yeah, there were other, I mean, a guy called Connell Dodds who did, I can't remember his outfit now, something about, was it Elephant Music? He put Oasis on in there early on and that sort of stuff. Right. And he ended up, because of that, being their booking manager. So, I mean, before long, he went to work for whichever agency Oasis were being booked out by, because they wanted him to be their booking agent. So he went from being like us small-time promoters in a piddly place in Newport to you know, having conversations with the world's media about Oasis and booking them into Nebworth and all that sort of stuff. So it wasn't just us. There were always and there were loads of sort of other sort of grassroots. There was an outfit called the Scum City Surfers that put some great gigs on in there and that as well. They did stuff like Cheetah Chrome Motherfuckers. I think that might have been them. And there was a few other people as well bringing in, you know, similar stuff, if you like, sort of ground level, gnarly, noisy.
Yeah.
Well, punk with a small p.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. So yeah.
So I have a stash of records here. I'm going to flash them. We don't need to talk about it too much because I picked too many. But,
yeah, I've got the same problem with the pile I've got as well.
But we'll get. Don't worry. Yeah. I think that you've put all these gigs on.
Right.
In Newport, and you can tell me otherwise. Tell me if I'm wrong. Okay. Well, and if you have anything to say about any of them, especially if they were bastards.
Well, that I can say now really that I think we ended up doing about 300. We used to number our gigs, so we did about 320 something altogether over the years. And I think in all that time, there was really you'd only need the fingers of one hand to count the bands that we wouldn't want back again.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'll get something. Let's see if I've got them here, and then you're going to tell me them afterwards.
All right, okay.
This is in absolutely no order.
Yeah, okay.
So, Drive Like Jehu.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, John Royce, what a star that guy is, you know. He's still got friends in Newport now that correspond with him and everything. And we were so lucky to get a Drive Like Jehu gig, because really nobody knew who they were before Rocket from the Crypt. Yeah. You know, it was only the reflected glory, if you like, from Rocket from the Crypt that illuminated Drive Like Jehu. Yeah. But they were astounding, you know. I can still remember going to do a weekend's record fairs in Weymouth and Bognor Regis. And spending the night overnight in between those two fairs in Bognor Regis, sleeping in the back of a van. But somebody had a radio in there and Peely was playing, and he played Bullet Train to Vegas. That was the first time I heard any Drive Like Jehu stuff, and it totally blew me away. Yeah, so Bognor Regis, thank you very much.
This one, the charmingly titled, I don't know if you'll be able to see it unless I get it really close.
Oh, Bitch Magnet.
Bitch Magnet.
Yeah, what a band. I'm not sure, did they? Yeah, they did play for us. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. And stunning. Yeah. You know, I mean, a lot of that stuff that a lot of the Seattle stuff and a lot of the Discord stuff and that, we had a lot of those bands because they just slotted in so well with our worldview and everything, you know, and nearly all those bands are just bursting at the seams with great people. Yeah. Fantastic people, you know.
Yeah. Have you read this book?
No, I haven't. No.
It's the
no, I didn't. No, I haven't.
No. Talking about his time in this band.
Right. I must see if I can get myself a copy of that. That looks really good. Yeah.
It's pretty. It's quite negative, but it's still good. This is a gig that these two bands played together, which I find quite amazing. And maybe you can tell me I'm wrong.
Right. Okay?
It's Urge Overkill.
Oh yeah, cracking. Yeah,
and I think this record is brilliant, underrated because it sounds like
that's the major label one, I think, isn't it? That they got a bit slagged for at the time. But exactly. No, you're right, it's great.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And I've got a feeling that this band played with them.
Yes, that's right. Not only that, but St Etienne came down and DJ'd for the gig.
Wow.
I can remember they phoned me up in the afternoon in the shop, the afternoon of the gig, and it was Bob Stanley, and he said, "Oh, hello, it's Bob Stanley." And I, occasionally used to get phone calls, and it was like, "Yeah, right, whatever," But he persuaded me that it was him. And he was saying, "Look, we're coming down to see Urge Overkill tonight, and we just wondered if we could DJ for you." And it's like we never really had DJs at gigs. There was a DJ booth there, but none of us wanted to DJ, not because we didn't want to DJ, but because we didn't have time. When you're running a gig, it can be quite a complicated beast. If it's busy or if the bands are quite demanding, you need all your manpower to to make sure things go smoothly. You don't want to be tied to a DJ booth. So we said, well, yeah, okay. So they came down, they were lovely, absolutely charming people. And they started playing, and I was a bit pissed off really, because they were playing Beatles and Rolling Stones, and I was thinking, this is all really obvious stuff. I could have done this, And then gradually, as the evening wore on, they got more and more obscure, and the music got better and better and better, sort of thing. And it totally worked brilliantly, sort of thing. And Urge Overkill were, stunning. Again, nobody really ever played for us if we didn't want them to play for us. That was always the bottom line. Do we want to see this band? Do we want them to play for us in Newport? So you'll have to forgive me if I'm always saying, "Oh, this band were great," but we knew they were going to be great before they came there. That's why they were going to be there, if you see what I mean.
Of course it makes sense. I just think lineup-wise, that's quite odd.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the connection is, apart from, I know...
There wouldn't have been any... They didn't come as a tour support or anything like that. We used to have a system where the shop used to get deluged with demos, cassette demos, all the time. Sometimes you'd open the post, there'd be maybe 10 demos a day, sort of thing, cassettes. And we used to have a system where I used to put a white self-adhesive sticker on the front, a pricing sticker on the front, and I'd play it. And if I liked it, I put a tick. And if I didn't like it, I put a cross. And then anybody else that happened along from Cheap Sweaty Fun would play it and do the same. And if somebody got all ticks, then we offered them a gig. If they got all crosses, they were told, usually politely, that no, sorry, we couldn't do anything for them. And if there was a reasonably equal balance of ticks and crosses, every now and again we'd have like a bit of a meeting, a pre-arranged meeting, and play all those things and thrash it out and try and put them on one side of the fence or the other. So Eugenius I don't think they probably would have sent us a tape in. We probably would have got a phone call from somebody representing them, or maybe them as well. And because obviously we knew who they were.
Yeah.
And incidentally, we had some fantastic Scottish bands came down, almost universally brilliant.
Yeah, this is a brilliant one.
Yeah.
So I just, okay, I saw the flyer for it and I didn't necessarily believe it, but maybe it's true.
Yeah, they played for us twice. Yeah, from my point of view, I think people quite often get Napalm Death wrong. Whenever I see, if I'm going through somebody's boxes of records and I see a Napalm Death record in the metal section, I always tut, and for half a sixpence, I'd move it into the punk section.
especially at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, after meeting them, that would reinforce that doubly. They were totally ground level people, really just totally into playing and that, no front to them whatsoever. Barney, the singer, when they played for us, he spent most of the couple of hours in between the doors and the bandstand on the door just chatting to us, just shooting the breeze, and anybody that came in as well, and that sort of thing. We used to try and not put sort of barriers up between sort of bands and the audience. I mean, we never really had a dressing room in the venue. Bands could go and sort of sit upstairs if they wanted to, sort of thing. But most of the time, they'd be downstairs drinking and that. we used to, and unless bands or tour managers specifically told us not to, we used to let people, if people arrived early for a gig, we'd let them to come in and watch the sound check, because quite often bands play things in sound checks that they don't play in the set. Yeah. And we used to get phone calls occasionally. I get phone calls in the shop if we were doing sort of, say, some of the pop punk stuff we did, like maybe the Ataris or whatever. We used to get like a youngish sort of audience coming for that. And when they used to travel, we used to get lots of people coming up from sort of Devon and Cornwall and that for bands like that. And I'd occasionally get concerned parents phoning up just to sort of test the water to see whether little Johnny or little Jemima was going to survive the evening, sort of thing, you know. And then, yeah. And often they'd say, they've asked me to ask, would it be at all possible, maybe, possibly, if they could maybe meet the band? And I said, well, it'd be difficult not to, because they'll just be wandering around afterwards. Just go up and say hi. You know, there was very little of that. So again, this is the punk rock thing. You know, there's no difference to me between people in bands and people in the audience. You know, people in the audience are just people that aren't in bands yet. Or they're in bands that aren't playing that night.
My experience is that the people in the audience look more like they're in the band than the people in the band.
Sometimes that's true, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Oh, flipper, yeah. Oh, yeah, what can you say? I mean, that was one of those landmark bands that we were just so over the moon to put on, you know. And they were a band. I've only ever seen two bands that fall into the same category of flipper, and the other was Sun. And they were a band that completely split the audience down the middle, 50-50. 50% of people hated them, 50% of people absolutely loved them, sort of thing. I just thought they were, unbeatable. Yeah, just great, you know.
This is,
I have a feeling I missed one or two of our gigs over that 23 years, only one or two, and I think that was one of them. Right. So I wasn't there for that, unfortunately. I would have liked to have been, but you know, hey, you can't see them all.
No, here's one of my favourite bands. It's No Means No.
Oh yeah. I think they played for us like at least twice, maybe three times. Yeah. And the first time they were just, that was when they had the three brothers in rather than just the two, and I just couldn't believe the level of telepathy between them, the timing. I mean, you know the band, obviously, very, very strange time signatures and sort of building in gaps into their music, and the way that they stopped and then started in unison, I didn't know how they did it. The only explanation to me was telepathy. I couldn't think of another way that they could be so disciplined and so spot on. And again, some of the nicest people you'll ever meet.
Yeah, I've never seen them.
Well, we've all got a few things, haven't we? That you know, again, you can't see them all, but snuff. Do the shake and vac and put the freshness back.
This is a great record, though. This is a good record.
Yeah, they did some great shows for us. I think they did one of the Christmas shows as well. Yeah, the Christmas shows were always pretty legendary. It's total chaos. Yeah. Everybody always came. It didn't matter really who was on the bill. We'd have 500 people squeezed into TJ's sort of thing, and it was usually divided up. We got into this thing because we loved them so much, of the headliner at the Christmas show for most of those 23 years that we were doing gigs was either the Membranes or Goldblade.
Oh, so John Rock Band.
Yeah, because John was so fantastic with us. Again, there's a band that did a very early gig for us, sort of thing, and we felt completely at home with them and them with us, I think. And they just kept coming back. And the Christmas, if you ask John Robb about it, the Christmas show was always crazy. I can't quite remember now where the tradition started, but somebody brought along quite early in our 23 odd year, brought along a big black sack full of shredded paper from work, right? And this shredded paper got distributed across the crowd and the band, you know, when the headlining band went on. And this developed over the years until probably towards the end, we were getting maybe 50 or 60 sacks of shredded paper, right? And it was just bedlam, but it was great. You know, this stuff was just everywhere. We always tried to do the Christmas show on December the 23rd, so that it was a proper. You can't have a Christmas show on December the 2nd. That's nonsense to me. Yeah. The only reason we didn't do it on December the 24th, which is when we'd really like to have done it, is that no band wants to work that night because, of course, they've got to get back for Christmas themselves. Yeah. So that's perfectly understandable. But so we compromised and made it December the 23rd. And it was like, yeah, it was always a great occasion. And like 50% on the way in, 50% of the people would grumble that it was Gold Blade again. And the other 50% say, yes, Gold Blade again. But when push came to shove, all 500 of them wanted to be in that same square meter at the front of the stage, going completely, you know, barking mad. Yeah, it was lovely.
That's cool.
Anybody that was there will tell you.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll speak to John Robb if I can.
Yeah.
Here's one. I don't actually know if you put these on. I've mentioned on a few of the posters.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was a tribute band or not because I couldn't work out if this band would. Here's the thing: it's the Misfits.
Right. Yeah. They played for us 3 times. Cool. Yeah, we put one of their records out as well. Like, yeah. I mean, admittedly, it wasn't with Glenn Danzig, the original lineup. But the first time they played for us, they had Jerry Only and Doyle and Dr. Chud, and that they were sort of pretty well. Jerry Only and Doyle were original members, and Chud was like a long-running drummer sort of thing. Again, Jerry Only. I mean, just despite the image of sort of, well, the image. It was a fun, yeah, exactly. lovely bloke. And the last time they played for us, they had Marky Ramone drumming for them, and it was one of those strange evenings where when they finished playing, Marky Ramone threw his sticks into the crowd, ran off the stage, ran through the club, out of the door, into a car, and off to the hotel. Total like rock star sort of behavior, like nonsense. Yeah. Jerry, it took him an hour to get off the stage just because he was talking to people. Right. And it's like, that's, yeah. They were great. I mean, two of the shows were sort of straight Misfit shows. And one of them, I think the one in the middle of the 3, was when they did that 1950s sort of thing. Okay. Which was, it probably most people will look back on that now and think, dodgy patch sort of thing. But actually that album's really good if you don't try and think that it's too much like the original Misfits. It's a good piece of work sort of thing. And they did one tour sort of with that sort of thing. And yeah, they were always great to us. They were always quite happy to come back. I mean, there was, I think, the first time they played for us, it was the first time they played for us, their booking agent had booked them into Ireland afterwards. So, as you know, Newport is fairly due west of London, and then due west of us is the ferry ports to the south of Ireland.
Yeah.
But this Burke of a booking agent had booked them on a ferry from Holyhead in North Wales. Oh. If you've ever tried driving from Newport to Holyhead, it's an absolute nightmare.
6 hours.
You've either got to drive back to England, back to Bristol or whatever, and then up the M5 and the M6 and then along the North Wales coast, which is a huge mileage. Or if you go cross country, the roads are an absolute nightmare. And he booked them onto a ferry at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't finish till 1 o'clock. So we had to put them on first, right? So we didn't find this out until the band actually arrived, and the tour manager said, "Oh, well, you know, we can get to Holyhead in a couple of hours from here, can't we? It's like, no. So their main concern was not about catching the ferry or going on first. Their main concern was that after they played, if they played early, that people wouldn't stick around to see the other bands on the bill that would therefore be playing after them. They were really concerned about that, and they made several announcements off the stage to say, please stay behind when we finished and see the other bands. They deserve your attention as well. And it's bands like that go the extra mile. They're actually participating in what they think they're participating in, and that's worth an awful lot.
Yeah,
you don't often see that, and yeah, they were great.
Yeah, well, it's the thing, isn't it? I say it myself that I think that the crowd and the band and the venue and everything is the event. Like,
yes, absolutely.
The event is everyone, not just the three people like rocking away or whatever. So, talking of three people, it's therapy.
Yeah, we go back a long way with those guys. Yeah, I'm still in touch with them now. Great. We had one of their very first gigs in the UK, and they got the ferry over to Liverpool, and they got a hire car. They didn't have a van. There's only three of them, sort of thing. So they had a hire car. But they were, by the time they got all their sort of cases and drums and all that in the back, there was no room for their like personal stuff. So they strapped it all to a roof rack on the top of this car, came hairing off down the M6 and down to Newport. And when they got here, all their personal stuff on the roof rack had blown off on the motorway. They had nothing. They had the clothes they stood up in. That was it. And we managed to get them clothing and bedding and sleeping bags and stuff like that sort of thing to tide them over, sort of thing. And I think they always remembered that you know that you know, we helped them out when they needed helping out. They were a support band then to Dr. Fibes and the House of Wax Equations. Do you remember them?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, they were really good, but sort of in quite a bit of a sort of a trippy sort of way. But yeah, they were really good too, sort of thing. But yeah, Therapy just tore the place apart. And they came back, they played for us, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 times altogether, including times really when they were too big to be playing for people like us. But they were always very happy to come back and play for us, sort of thing. And again, it's that sort of thing that counts a lot with me. Yeah,
they're one of the bands that me and friends, Bob or whatever from the band and a few others, we saw them a lot around this time.
Yeah. And they're still good now. I still see them occasionally, and great band. Still love them.
They were a big influence on us at the time.
Right.
Here's a band that's was always causes mixed opinions. It's No Effects.
Yeah. Well, we had 3 or 4 gigs with them, and like 3. And again, we always found them great, fantastic. But the gigs we had with them were all quite early on. Right. I think the first time they played for us, we probably had maybe about 100 people. So it was very early on in their career, sort of thing. But Fat Mike's always been great. The last time they played Newport, they played a much bigger venue across the road from TJ's. And I went over to try and get tickets on the afternoon because my son wanted to go as well. So we walked into the venue. We were walking across the foyer, and Fat Mike was just coincidentally walking out of the venue, sort of thing. And he recognised me, although I probably hadn't seen him for sort of 7 or 8 years, maybe 10 years, possibly, sort of thing. Straight away, Simon, how you doing? And it was really good, you know. Yeah, they were all really nice guys.
L7.
That was that one of ours. That gig never happened.
Oh,
there was a poster. Yeah, there's a few in there, maybe 3 or 4, where our attitude always was that if a gig gets as far as a poster being designed and a number going on the poster, then it had a life, and it's in the archives, if you like.
Right. Okay.
But 1 or 2 things got pulled last minute or whatever, and that unfortunately was one of them. Although having said that, I saw him some years later in Manchester, and I think I'd have preferred them if they had played for us at that time a couple of years earlier. They were quite sort of rocky, And I thought, yeah, but a couple of years earlier would have made all the difference, I think.
Right,
So,
okay. So it
yeah.
didn't happen.
Yeah, so just occasionally something like that.
Yeah.
It's only 2 or 3, I think.
Peg Boy.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, there's a connection with them, and one of the things that I pulled out to talk about as well.
Okay.
And this all stems from Naked Reagan, which was like the mother band. And again, that was a band that we got on with so well. And again, people in Newport are still in touch with Jeff Pizzati, the singer, and that Peg Boy were fantastic. And I remember that the singer from Peg Boy used to be in an American punk band called the Bhopal Sticks.
Right.
But I think had like a 12-inch mini album and a 7-inch single. And when they got to Newport, we were hassling him to do a Bhopal Stiffs song, and he was absolutely floored that anybody in Wales had ever heard of the Bhopal Stiffs. But we got them to do it. They did a song called EPA, which was fantastic. So, and we ran a minibus trip over to Belgium to see Peg Boy, which turned out to be quite a riot sort of thing. But that was cracking. Yeah, great band. So,
I have a couple more. I should stop because we should get to your stuff. But I'm so interested to hear all these stories that I can't.
Well,
so there's a couple more, and we'll move on.
Go for it. It's your. Yeah. Oh, that was a weird one. That we had their first ever British gig.
Oh.
It was they were the tour support for Rape Man.
Oh,
and we had the first date on the tour, and I have to say that we were already looking forward to Dinosaur as well, and they were awful, really poor. But I didn't realise till afterwards, talking to them afterwards, that they'd driven non-stop from the north of Germany to Newport. They'd had virtually no sleep for about 36 hours, and they were absolutely shot to pieces, sort of thing. When we ran a bus trip to see Rape Man in Chester a week or so later, obviously they were still on the tour, and they were like a band transformed. Absolutely, they were on top of the game, sort of thing, and they were stunning, really good. So, and I actually made Jay Mascis speak at double speed. Because you know he's famous for the drawl.
Yes.
I mean, seriously, he's a slow speaker by any sense of the word. When they played for us in Newport, he was asking about. He found out I dealt in records, and he asked if I had a copy of a 7-inch single by a band called The Rings. It was an early Chiswick label single, I think, and I had one. So I said, "Oh, I think I've got one somewhere. I'll see if I can find it," sort of thing. And I took it up to Chester. And when we got to the venue, he was just hanging around inside, sat down with a beer sort of thing. So I just went up and popped it on his lap, and I honestly couldn't shut him up for about 2 or 3 minutes.
Whoa!
And if you can find me anybody else that can say that they couldn't shut Jay Mascis up. No, he was great about it, really good. So yeah, a great single too. So
yeah, he's a master of the one-word reply.
Absolutely.
That's it.
But he can make the word no take up 10 seconds. Yeah. Oh, Sebadoh, yeah. We had a great show with them. People said to us that with them, they were one of those bands where you either got a really good show or you got a pretty shambolic sort of show.
Yeah. And
they were absolutely stunning. We had such a good gig from them. We had a good crowd in for it and everything, and yeah, they absolutely went for it. Unfortunately, never got to see them again, sort of thing. Just the one gig they did for us, and which is a regret. But yeah, they were great.
Yeah, they got quite big, didn't they, Sebadoh, for a bit?
Yeah, for a while. Yeah. And they were putting out loads of stuff every week. Every week there'd be a Sebadoh record and a Yellow Man record.
Yeah.
And maybe a Frankie Paul record as well.
Okay, did you put the Fall on?
Yeah, we did. Funnily enough, it's the only time we've done gigs 2 days in a row. The first one was Napalm Death. This was over an Easter weekend. Napalm Death was on the Saturday, and the Fall was on the Sunday. And again, I thought they were great. And again, that's another band, a bit like Sebago, where people say you get a good one or a bad one, and we had a good one. They were in that sort of mutated rockabilly sort of mode, and they absolutely I thought they were great, you know. But I thought it was well, I don't think I needed to learn that lesson at that time, but it would have taught me a lesson about being in bands and how you should conduct yourself. They had a tour support called was it Seafood, an indie band that fleetingly had.
There was a band called Seafood,
but there was another band called something else. No, not Seafood. No, it was Seafood, I think. Seafood, I think they were signed to 4AD, maybe. They turned up in a sleeper coach.
Not right? Seafood.
No, it wasn't Seafield. No, it was Seafood, I think.
Oh, right.
They turned up in a sleeper coach, which at that time, just from chatting to drivers, were £400 a day plus fuel plus drivers' wages. Right? They were a 50 quid tour support. Right? So they were getting in debt to their record company every night they were on tour. Right? They were dreadful. Basically, they won nobody over at all. They made no friends at all. The Fall turned up in a transit van with 3 people in the front, which was Marky Smith sat in the middle, his sister on the passenger side, and she was looking after all the business stuff and the merch, and his cousin was driving, and he was the roadie and the tech wizard, and all the amps and all the rest of the band were in the back of the van.
In the back.
Yeah, in the back of the van. Now, I think their guarantee, I think I'm right in saying their guarantee was 1,500 quid plus like 70% over the break-even figure, which was a pretty standard sort of arrangement sort of thing. And they ended up walking away with they probably walked away with about 2.5 or 3 grand or something like that. And I just thought, who's got this right?
Yeah.
It should have been absolutely the other way around. The Fall really should have been in the sleeper coach, and Seafood should have been in the transit.
So what year was this Fall gig?
Early 2000s, 2002 maybe, something like that. Like dates, I'm crap with dates.
Yeah.
Incidentally, that gig, the TJ's gig, has just come out on vinyl, sort of thing, about a couple of months ago. So I've had those in, sort of thing, which was that's an accolade. It's the first time that's ever happened. Although we've had bootlegs at some of our gigs. There was a Pogues one came out, and a No Effects one and a Green Day one as well. But the Fall was the first official sort of release of one of our shows. That was nice.
At the minute, every single Fall gig has been released.
Seemingly. Yeah, ridiculous numbers. Yeah, crazy.
I'm not making any effort to keep up with that at all.
No, I think very few people are. I think people just buy the gigs they saw, maybe. The ones they were at, you know. That's it. Oh, where do you start? Where do you start with these guys? Yeah, I mean, these guys had a lifelong effect on me.
Good or bad?
Oh, absolutely amazing. Impossible. I find it very hard in a way to talk about them because time plays weird tricks with you.
Right.
The first time they played for us twice. The first time they played for us was their first ever British gig.
Oh, okay.
And it was jaw-dropping. I mean, in the real sense of the word. I can remember us all stood round watching the sound check and just thinking, what the fuck is this? What is this? I mean, we'd have access to the record and everything, but just, and it was complete chaos. When the band turned up, their booking agent at the time was I don't know whether you know him, a ranting poet called Nick Topchek. He's got quite well known as a poet since, but he was booking the tour out.
Yeah.
And when the band arrived, Kramer, who was playing bass for him, took on the role of sort of organizer in chief, if you like.
Yeah.
So he came up to me and said, "Oh, did you get the list of stuff we needed for the gig?" So I said, "Well, yeah, I got some stuff," and showed him the list. He said, "Oh, no, we need a lot of electronic stuff as well, because we've got all American electronics, and we need to transform it down to European sort of voltage and that. So like this was about 10 to 5, right? So it was like, right, well, we got to go to a plant hire place now, and we've got to get some of those yellow cube boxes, transformers they use on building sites. So Craig said, right, well, let's go. So I had my car parked out the back of the venue. So we went out to the car, and he wouldn't get in it because it was a 3-wheeled Reliant Robin. He would not get in the car.
We wouldn't trust it to not fall over.
No. Eventually, I managed to persuade him to get in, and we drove across town and picked up a couple of these boxes and drove back. But he was absolutely bricking himself the entire way. But the other side of that was that the night before, Nick Tokchek had phoned me up and said, look, I got the rider and stuff. He didn't mention anything about the electronics, unfortunately. Otherwise, we'd have got it sorted earlier and spared Kramer the nightmare of the 3 wheels. But he said, have you got a pen? You need to write this down. So, yeah, okay. So I was on the phone, got the pen out, right? He said, we need 12 large size, very garish women's dresses. So I was writing this down saying, yeah, okay. And we need 200 wooden spring-loaded clothes pegs. Right, okay. And we need 12 large safety pins. And we need it's more than that, about 12 bottles of assorted food colouring. And we need 24 condoms. So I was writing this down, and as the list was getting longer, I was thinking, what the hell have we let ourselves in for here? What? I mean, we had a great crowd in for that. I can remember one of the PA stacks fell over when the support band was on. People were totally up for it. And when they came on, because it was so early in their sort of history, it was still with the twin drummer lineup. So, most bands with 2 drummers, they'll have a drum kit on one side of the stage and another drum kit on the other side of the stage with a drummer behind each, not the butthole surfers. They laid the drums out in 2 long lines across the stage, and the drummers ran backwards and forwards up and down these lines, drumming like that. It was extraordinary. When they always start, the band come on and start a riff, worrying away at this riff, and the drummers get going, and the whole thing is already completely mental. And then Gibby comes on. There's always a chair for him to stand on, and he has a bullhorn. So he came on, and what he'd done is he'd got all these dresses on, one on top of each other, all 12, right? One on top of each other. He had really long hair. He had all the clothes pegs in his hair, right? And so he came on, he started singing, and he was sort of doing this, shaking his head like this, and all these clothes pegs were flying off sort of all over the place. And when they get to the next instrumental break, he puts the ball down, starts tearing these dresses off. And it quickly becomes obvious that what he's done is he's filled the condoms with food colouring and pinned them to the inside of these dresses. So as he's tearing these dresses off, the condoms are bursting. His food colouring is splurging all over the place. We get to the stage where he strips off, tears off the last dress, and he's covered in this amalgam of sweat and shit and food colouring. His whole body is completely some mutated colour of all these food colourings put together. It's all run down his body, down his legs. At this point, he's got a pair of grits on and a pair of boots. Right, so it's all run down his body, down his legs, into his boots. And we've got, I should have looked it up, I got a fantastic photograph, a 10x8 black and white, of him having taken one of these boots off, it being full of food colouring, just sort of going. It was absolutely extraordinary. Yeah. And the second gig wasn't bad either.
Oh, damn.
That was nuts, but in other ways.
And you have to clean it all up, I guess.
Yeah, pretty well. Yeah.
So I've sacrificed a couple. I've got 3 more here, and then we will be done. I promise. Anyone who's still watching, well done. Yeah. I don't know if you put this band on because I didn't see a poster.
Right.
I think that we've spoke about it before, but I'm not sure. Is it Bad Brains? Did you put Bad Brains?
Yeah, we did. 1987.
Awesome.
Yeah. There's tales, as you might expect, there's tales for this one as well.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping.
What we did with this was we were still doing gigs then. It was right towards the end of doing gigs at the Stowe Labour Club.
Right.
But we thought that the Bad Brains would be too big because it only had about 150 capacity. So we went to the Pill Labour Club, which was a bigger club at the other end of town.
Right.
So we booked it into there. When we got there on the night, having sold all the tickets, they told us that we couldn't have the downstairs ballroom because they'd forgotten that they had a bingo night on. Right. So we were in the upstairs bar, which was probably smaller than the Stowe Labour Club, and we'd sold twice as many tickets.
Disaster.
And so also we made some last minute phone calls because there was no stage in this upstairs room at all, nothing. So we made some last minute phone calls and tried to get a stage in, which never turned up. So the Bad Brains played on the floor. And it was a skittle alley. So it was a long, narrow room, and they played at the far end. But halfway down on the left-hand side, there was what I could only describe as, quite literally, a garden shed, a wooden garden shed, which was the bar, which wasn't open, but which foolishly they'd left drink in there.
Ah, okay.
So somebody broke in through the roof, and while the band were playing, all these like 1.5 litre optic bottles of spirits were being passed around the crowd. There was a load of Bristol boys came over, and I think most of GBH turned up as well, if memory serves, sort of thing. They were all so pissed, they never got to see the gig. If you ever meet anybody from GBH or Bristol that says they saw the Bad Brains in Newport, they're probably lying. They were all outside in the street, paralytic, leant against the wall of the venue, too pissed to climb the stairs to get in. But while the gig was on, not all, but some of those people got involved in shenanigans with, well, basically wrecking cars that were in the street, running up and down the roofs and bonnets of cars in the street outside. So the police were called. So when they arrived, most of these people had disappeared, but they could hear this infernal racket from coming down the stairs from the gig. So the police turned up into the room. There was about 20 of them. This room was absolutely jam-packed with people completely going apeshit. Absolutely, the Bad Brains were just unbelievably great, totally going ballistic. By this time, the crowd had pushed the band back so that they were pretty well all behind the drum kit. The drummer had his back to the wall, and the kit had been pushed back. It was only the drum kit that was stopping him being pushed through the wall, more or less. So the police came in, somebody tipped me the wing, and I saw it took them about 10 minutes to work their way through the crowd to the front. And their intent obviously was to stop the gig. Yeah. But in that 10 minutes, the gig was going to finish anyway. Yeah. So people just delayed them, got in their way and this, that, and the other. And I'll never forget, I was down on the front line. And when the first couple of coppers turned up by my shoulders, so immediately in front of the band, I mean, literally 2 feet away from HR, they did the crashing last chords of the last song, and HR did a complete backflip, just like that. And these guys, these coppers, were just standing there with their mouths open, not knowing what they were witnessing, yeah.
Yeah, they were witnessing something legendary. Yeah.
Yeah, astounding. Yeah.
Amazing.
We were, I mean, on a general tip, we were so lucky in Newport that, you know, we had all those sort of places that we were able to put bands on. We had bands that wanted to come and play there, sort of thing, and we had people that wanted them to come and play and made it happen. We were so lucky.
Is this because, like, I know the geography, like Newport and Bristol are very, very near.
Yeah.
Right? And Newport and Cardiff is very, very near.
Yeah,
So were bands just playing Newport and not playing those two places, or would they do all three, or what?
they would sometimes do Bristol. Cardiff back then really wasn't on any of the tour schedules much at all. The bigger bands played there because they had the indoor arena and sort of big venues like that. But they didn't at that point. I mean, they had the Welsh Club that's been there for ages, but they didn't really have much else. There were a couple of other really small venues like the Square Club and that, but they were much smaller even than Le Pub or the Stower Labour Club, sort of thing. 50 people, and that's pretty well it. So it tended to be on a different circuit, if you like. Some of the bands that played for us would play at the Fleece in Bristol, or and the Tropic Club as well. And we quite often used to go over to the Tropic Club in particular, or the Croft as well in Stokes Croft. And there was another pub right down on the roundabout by the Bear Pit. I can't remember what that was called now. Yeah, there was a few places there. I mean, it never used to bother us if bands wanted to play Bristol as well. We'd still want to do them in Newport. Some of the promoters were a bit precious about that, and they wouldn't want bands to play within 30 miles. But I mean, to be honest, people often used to make the choice to come to Newport anyway. We'd often, as I said to you earlier, we'd often have people coming up from Devon and Cornwall, and they come to Newport almost rather than Bristol. Right. Because it was just a sort of, it was a place that wasn't run by any stretch of the imagination by big business. You could come and really relax there and just see a great gig, and nobody would bother you, and you wouldn't be bothered by anything going on around you. It was that sort of atmosphere.
Yeah. I got three more here, but we don't need to talk about this one because I know we've already talked about Drive, so we don't need to talk about this so much. But I know you put on Rocket from the Crypt with the Heads. Yes,
with the Heads. That gig holds the house record for people in TJs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 650 people we had in for that in a venue that's fire limit was 325. Whoa. There are people that came to that gig that never got beyond the pay-in desk, the door arrangements on the way in.
Right.
But if you find some of those people now and ask them what that gig was like, they will tell you it was amazing.
No, they didn't see it.
Because it was.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Yeah. It was actually, there was an enemy photographer there, and they used a photograph from that gig. In the old days when they did the gig guide in the enemy, they always used to have a live photograph above it.
Yeah.
And they used a photograph of Rocket from the Crypt from TJ's as a couple of weeks later as their photograph. And you could make out the band sort of on the fairly rudimentary stage that we had at that point. And the audience, I can only really describe it as human soup. Yeah. It was liquid. Yeah. It was like, just crazy.
Yeah.
But fantastic,
I do not doubt it. Girls Against Boys.
Oh, yeah. You're picking all the good ones. This is a band, again, that absolutely we slotted in with them and they slotted in with us. And we had, I think, again, they played for us about 3 times. And Soulside, that they were before they were Girls Against Boys, played for us as well, which I think that's where we established the rapport with them, if you like. Right. The Soulside played for us when, at that time, they weren't very well known unless you were completely into Washington, sort of DC sort of stuff. Girls Against Boys, I think it was the second time they played for us. They came on stage, and I was chatting to Scott afterwards, and he said to me, "That's the best gig we've ever done." And I was, And I said to him, "Well, that's great." But I said, "Come on," I said, "some of the stuff you guys must have done in Washington must have capped that over the years. Your hometown sort of thing, that Baltimore sort of Washington area, your hometown with people that in the crowd, and that surely must be some of the best gigs you've ever done." He said, "No," he said, "We've just done the best gig we've ever done tonight." And I have to say, I caved in at that point because it was, brilliant. You're getting tired of me saying that was brilliant. This is great, but
no, because I've got a feeling this last one you're not going to say was brilliant. This is the very last one, and then we're going to talk. And I think you would probably put your house on the record I'm going to hold up next, because I actually listened to this album recently, and I really, really like it. Don't like anything they did after this. Really like
Right.
this album. I'm pretty sure you put this gig on, and it's completely worldwide legendary.
Yeah, yeah, they played for us a couple of times as well. Yeah, again, you know, that was, it was a weird gig in a way. It was a weird gig. And in fact, the gig should have been exactly the other way around, because it was a package tour, Hole, Therapy, and Daisy Chainsaw. And on the night, I didn't really think too much to Hole. Right. I'm not saying they were rubbish or crap or anything like that. They were probably as good as they were going to be, sort of thing. And I enjoyed them, sort of thing. But I have to say, Therapy, who we were obviously already familiar with by that point, were as astoundingly good as ever. But Daisy Chainsaw were the revelation on that gig. Right. They were absolutely stunning live. I mean, I like their records, but nothing prepared me for, they were just, they were really, really great. And of course, there's all, Kurt from Nirvana was there, sort of traveling with Courtney and all that sort of stuff. That's all well covered. That's well covered badly in lots of other places. So, there's stories. I'll do you the stories if you want.
Oh, no, well, we want the inside scoop. That's what we're here for. Anyone who's still watching after an hour and 10 minutes needs
the scoop is that most of the stuff you read about that gig isn't true. That's that was Hole's booking agent was a guy called Russell Warby. He was originally from Nottingham, and we'd known him for years before he made the transition from like a small time promoter like us, and he moved to London and went to work for one of the big live booking promoters. I mean, I remember running minibus trips up to see Naked Reagan at gigs in Nottingham. That was his gig, sort of thing. So we knew him, and he always used to offer us gigs that he was in control of later on when he moved up the ladder, sort of thing. So he offered us Nirvana not once but twice, and we turned them down not once but twice. the first time because they wanted 400 quid,
right?
And it was believe it or not, it was too much money. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, doesn't it? 400 quid, it was too much money. The second time he offered them to us, fairly shortly afterwards, so maybe they must have done 2 tours fairly close together. He offered them to us again for 400 quid, and we would have taken them then. But we already had a gig on the only night they could do. So we had to turn it down. So we turned them down twice. But the other story about the whole gig is that the band minus Courtney turned up in the afternoon, and the PA was already set up, and they got on with the business of doing line checks and sound checks and all the rest of it, and just feeling their way in. Really nice people, no side to them at all. They were really ground level people, sort of thing. And we were getting a bit concerned that there was no Courtney, sort of thing, and the band were making phone calls to find out what was going on. And it turned out in the end that they were driving down. Courtney was driving down from London with Russell Warby, and we didn't know it then, but with Kurt Cobain as well in the car. And they got to Newport, and about 200 yards up the road from TJ's is one of the busiest roundabouts in Newport, the Old Green. And they had a car crash on the Old Green roundabout with Russell and Courtney and Kurt in the car. It must have been, I know it must have been quite early in Russell Warby's sort of booking agent career, because he was driving a Skoda before Skodas were in any way as cool as they are now. Right. And it was sky blue. I remember it being sky blue. So the first we knew about this was Russell walked in to the venue with Courtney. About 2 or 3 minutes before we had to do the doors. I think the start time was 7:30, so it was about 7:25 or something like that. So he walked in, and we got her to do like a vocal mic check and that as well, sort of thing. And then they went off for their food, sort of thing. And we were just chatting. And while we were chatting, Russell's sky blue Skoda came past the venue on a low loader, basically on its way to the scrapyard. It was completely totaled. Everything was mashed up. All the I mean, they were lucky to get out of it, I think, without even cuts and bruises. Although obviously being on a roundabout, it was probably fairly low speed, but it made a right old mess of the Skoda. So that went off down the road, sort of thing, and the band went off to get fed. And we opened the doors, and there was quite a queue. So we got the queue in fairly rapidly, sort of thing. And I was on the door. And this guy came sort of wandering in, sort of fairly disheveled in really shitty sort of like, you know, like a sort of knitted woolen jumper with holes in the shoulders and that, hair all over his face. And we used to get all sorts of people wandering into TJ's because it wasn't in the most savoury sort of part of town. So occasionally you get people wandering in, stumbling in, literally. And this guy looked like that. So I said, right, mate, it's, I don't know what it was to get in, £7 or £5 or whatever it was to get in. And he didn't look at me, he was looking at the floor sort of thing. And he just mumbled something, which I couldn't make out at all. So I thought, all right, here we go then. This is, you know, I'm going to end up walking out of the booth and escorting him back up the pavement and sending him on his way, sort of thing. So I said, mate, there's a band's playing tonight. It's £6 in or whatever it was, sort of thing. And he sort of went, oh, I'm with Courtney, and pulled his hair back like that. And I said, yeah, of course you are, mate. Yeah, of course, come on in. You know, and he just came in. And I didn't really see him again then until the gig finished. And what we used to do was, if we had any tickets for the gigs left, we used to hand make all the tickets, and people occasionally used to ask for the tickets as keepsakes. So at the end of the gig, we just used to leave them lying about on the you know, where you paid to get in, and people would just help themselves. And I was doing that, and they were just leaving. And he came up to me and shook my hand and said, "Oh, you've got a really cool place here." So I was like, that's nice. Yeah. So there you go. So I met him once. Although he never played for us, which is a real regret. So I saw him a couple of times, but unfortunately not in the shitty confines of TJ's, which would have been great.
Yeah, because you gave, it sounds like you gave the Fall about £2,500, and you turned the other down for 400 quid.
Yeah. Well, there was some. I think the Nirvana gig was probably in, I don't know, would have been 1990 or something. Yeah. And the Fall gig was 2002 or 3. So obviously, you know, there was a distance between them. And the Fall had an established career, which, because I remember when the first Nirvana single came out, I'd not really heard of them before. It was very early on, and they were pretty unknown over here. And I can't remember which record company. It was on Sub Pop. I can't remember who was distributing Sub Pop then. But they did the big sell on it, sort of thing. So, these guys are going to be huge, you know. And I said, yeah, right. You tell me that every week about bands I never hear of again. But they persuaded me to take 6 copies anyway of this single, and I couldn't sell them. But we'd already had the Mudhoney first single in that Touch Me on 6/7 inch again on Sub Pop. And that absolutely flew out, and people were breaking the doors down for the Mudhoney single, and nobody wanted the Nirvana single, which was the other underlying thing about turning it down, was that, well, I can't give these singles away, you know, so £400 in 1990 under those circumstances was maybe not the most sensible thing. See, sounds childishly laughable now. But there you go.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, the ones that got away. Yeah.
But okay, let's talk about records of yours now. Let's move on. That was I could have gone on more. I even held back a bunch of records here. I was thinking we're going on too long here. I've got to stop this. But, you know,
yeah, you'll have trouble shutting me up, I'm afraid.
If anyone's still watching, hi.
Yeah.
So I send you a list of things, records. I'm going to go through it. Let's go.
Right. Okay.
Let's have a record from your favourite record shop.
Right. Well, this is a difficult one for me because I had my own record shop for 30 years. So I didn't used to spend an awful lot of time in other people's record shops because I was always in my own. So what I've done is, it's a bit of a cop-out. For me, although I love so much music from the past, music from the present is more important for me. Right. And music of the future is even more important I'm always looking forward to, what's going to hit me next week, rather than what hit me in 1967.
Okay.
Or whatever, that to me is that's great stuff, and I still love some of that stuff from all those years, right from when I first started buying records in, I think it was about 1965, all the way through. But what came in this week and what will come in next week, to me, has more significance. So under those terms, what I've done is I've picked, it's going to sound sacrilegious, but I've picked an online shop.
That's cool.
And I have to say that it's run by a friend of mine, but I wouldn't recommend it just from that point of view. I recommend it because it's an absolutely fantastic distro. You might be getting a twinkle as to who I'm meaning just now.
I know exactly who it is.
Yeah, this is a distro called Land of Treason.
Yeah.
Which is run by a guy called Pete, who I've known for, I think it must be 30 years ago, sort of thing. And actually, he was in a band that played for us back in the day, a great band called Humans the Size of Microphones. Yeah. Which is a great name for a band. And although an album of theirs came out more recently, sort of thing, which he's a bit sour about because he doesn't think it's right. It's absolutely a great album, and anybody should seek that out. But the last album that I bought off Pete for myself was the Karaiki album, which is Ian Mackay from Minor Threat and Fugazi, sort of thing. So so I bought a copy of this on the strength of the first track on side one, Clean Kill, which is an absolute killer track and as good as anything else that Ian's been involved with. The rest of the album, I think, perhaps doesn't quite live up to those expectations, but that track on its own is enough to make that, like a pretty essential purchase for me.
I agree.
And again, Ian's a guy that we work with in Fugazi and with the band that he was in that everybody's forgotten about, called the Evens as well. That was a real revelation. So again, I go back a long way with him, and he's a guy that I've got an awful lot of respect for. And in fact, I to be honest, I think you'd find it really hard work to find anybody that didn't have respect for Ian Mackay for what he's done and continues to do, with music of his own and of other people's as well. Absolutely running the Discord label.
Yeah, I think
great achievement.
If anyone's not read this, please.
Yeah, and there he is in the middle of the middle picture.
Yeah. And you got.
Yeah, so I'd recommend that to anybody. Sort of thing. As I say, maybe not up there with the best Fugazi album, sort of thing, but still a very, very worthwhile album nonetheless. And just for that one track, that Clean Kill track, which is fantastic, well worth it just for that.
Yeah. That's a good. I order stuff quite a lot from that Land of Treason as well. The last thing I got from him was a Japanese band called Blaze.
Blaze,
BLA.
Oh, Blaze, right. Oh, I don't know that.
Yeah. Just a reissue of some late 80s raging hardcore.
Yeah,
which
there's quite a lot of that going on, isn't there?
Yeah,
thankfully, because that stuff was so hard to get at the time.
Yeah.
That thank goodness it's being reissued now, because otherwise, it just get lost. So
so there's like Land of Treason. I get stuff from La Vida, Static Shock.
Yeah. Me too.
None of this stuff makes it into the shops. The Karaiki would.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff that's like a rung down. You need to go to places like Land of Treason and read up his little write-ups and sort of totally buy into his world. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, he's very good at that. Yeah. The write-ups, the reviews that he writes, spot on most of the time. I've yet to come across anything which I disagreed with, really. So yeah. Big up to Pete.
Yeah. He's southwest as well, isn't he? Is he Devon somewhere?
Is it Devon or is it Somerset? It's down near Axminster somewhere.
Yeah.
Middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Lovely place. I mean, you look out from his living room window, you get the most beautiful sort of panoramic view of sort of rural England. Absolutely fantastic sort of thing. Yeah, great place.
A record with memories.
Right. Well, this is the one that you've already touched on when you brought the Peg Boy one up. At this point, I shall have to admit to not being able to get to all the records that I wanted to get to physically, because the room I keep all this stuff in is absolutely floor to ceiling with stuff stacked in front of each other, maybe 4 or 5 deep. sort of thing. So it isn't always possible to be able to put my hands on the very thing that I wanted to put. So I was gonna do a Naked Reagan album, which was, as I said, the band that Pegboy came out from, sort of thing. But instead, we've got an album by The Bomb.
All right. Which
is Jeff Pezzati, the singer from Naked Reagan. It's the band he's, I think, maybe even still just about currently in. And it very much carries on the flame from Naked Reagan. Lovely sort of whoa, 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 whoa choruses, and just great tunes. One of the best bands to come out of Chicago by far, sort of thing. That's on No Idea, which is a great Florida label, really good label, sort of thing. So you can, that's one of those few labels that in a certain time period you could pretty well buy anything on that label and you'd know that it would be quality, sort of American sort of guitar stuff, not all hardcore sort of thing, not even all punk probably sort of stuff, but you know that they would have quality about it. And that's definitely one of those albums, just absolutely stuffed full of great tunes and great choruses. You can whistle any tune on that album. Although I won't, because I can't whistle. Well, you wouldn't want to hear me anyway.
But no, well, Pegboy like that. Pegboy tune.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think Chicago probably had, a fairly good dose of tunes.
Yeah,
better than most places,
Yeah. Actually, I don't know, where is that Pegboy record? I don't know where it is, but I think I actually think the Pegboy record that I picked out, Steve Albini plays on.
Yeah, I think he might have produced it as well.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that.
Yeah,
he's in the band on this record.
Yeah, they're very close because Jeff Pezzati, the singer from Naked Reagan, was also the bass player on the first Big Black thing on the Lungs 12-inch. So they obviously, the intertwining nature of sort of punk rock in places, they're well connected, sort of thing. So that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
A bargain find.
Bargain find. Right. Where are we? Somewhere in the pile. Right. That's that. Another band that we touched on already, the Misfits. This is the only record they ever had released in the UK when they were first around with Glenn Danzig as their singer. It's the Beware, so it's like a 12-inch mini album, but 7 tracks altogether, but stuff full of great stuff, great tunes on there, without a shadow of a doubt.
What label's that?
It's on Cherry Red.
Cherry Red.
Believe it or not. Yeah. We're still on Plan 9 sort of thing, but Cherry Red marketed it.
Because they did their Kennedys as well, didn't they? They did.
Yeah. They did. Sorry. I picked this up in I used to occasionally go buy-in for the shop in a very singular record shop in Lampeter out in West Wales called Hags's Record Shop.
Right.
And Hags, along with Cobb Records in Porthmadog in North Wales, I don't know whether you remember, but back in the sort of the 70s and 80s and 90s, I think as well, they used to advertise in the NME for buying records through the post. Right. And basically the deal was you sent them your records and they would then send you what they wanted to pay for them. But if you disagreed, you had to pay to have your records sent back, which tended to give them the advantage.
Yeah.
So, but they bought loads of records from people all throughout the UK that wouldn't have been able to walk down the road to a record shop and sell their records to a local record shop. And I picked this up in Hags's, I think for £1.25 or something like that sort of thing, which, that was pretty stupendous, really. And obviously still got it, resisted the temptation to sell it for like large amounts of money, because it's just a great record.
Yeah.
So it won't be leaving my back room.
Not that I care about the value of records, but I'm going to ask
you. How
much?
No, nor me. Really. I haven't seen one. I probably haven't seen a British copy for over 20 years. Right. I would imagine it's probably, in the real world, it's probably about £100. In online, you'd probably get quite a lot more for it. Right. £200 maybe, but I don't know is the real answer.
There's a question. So there's a question then. I like the only record fair I go to now really is your one.
Yeah.
So do you pay any attention to Discogs and whatnot when you're pricing up your things?
Only if I'm completely flabbergasted by something. I hand on heart, generally speaking, I try not to. It depends. I mean, if somebody brings me in like a bunch of Northern Soul singles, if that's an area in which I have absolutely no skill whatsoever, sort of thing. So I'm reduced then pretty well to trying to make use of the internet to find a reasonable price for things. But if it's the sort of stuff that through my 40 years of doing this, I should have an idea about, and I'm quite happy to rely on just my accumulated knowledge, such as it is.
Yeah.
And if I make a mistake, I don't care.
Right.
I don't care. If somebody brings me a record and it looks complete shit, and I pay £1 for it, and I put £2 on it, and I get £2 for it, and the person that gives me £2 says, if you look on Discogs, this is going for 400 quid. It's like, I don't care. I made my markup. I'm quite happy. You've had a real bargain. You'll come back.
Yeah,
that's great. I like a bargain as much as anybody else, and it depresses me somewhat if bargains are completely excluded by people's access to the internet, because that's what's happening more and more.
Massively so.
Yeah, and the other thing as well about record shops and the internet is that I occasionally go into record shops, and you start flicking through the racks, and you're going through, and you're thinking, yeah, okay, this is all a certain type of stuff. It's all in a certain range. So if you've been buying this stuff in, where's the good stuff? And the answer is all the good stuff has been taken out to put on eBay. Yeah. And what you're left with is the middling stuff that won't sell so well online, sort of thing, and it's like, that's always a disappointing experience, I find, because what you're left with all the Phil Collins albums and all the stuff that Yeah. So yeah, I try and do it from the heart, but with a bit of knowledge from the head pushed in there somewhere as well.
No, it's just saying that, like I've said it a few times on previous episodes, you can't even go to a charity shop and find a bargain now.
No, you can't. No, that's true. Yeah.
And that's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. I mean, I have a story about that as well. I used to do a record fair in Shrewsbury before we got handed out of there by the council, but that's a separate story. And I remember going there to do the fly posting one time, and on my route round Shrewsbury was an Oxfam shop.
Yeah. And
they had in the window, they had like a contraption to display LPs one above each other like this, and they had about 6. And I can't actually remember now. It was all sort of 60s stuff, but like good stuff. Somebody had obviously dropped a good batch of stuff on them, sort of thing. And I thought, oh blimey! I went up to the window. I thought, I haven't seen those particular titles for like a long time. I went up, and they were all priced up at book price. They would have been the book price, then the price guide. Yeah. They were all at the top level of that, or over in some cases. And I sort of tutted and walked away. And the next time I went back to Shrewsbury, about 4 months later, obviously on the same run round, all those LPs were still there, all with those same over-the-top prices on. The only thing that had changed was that the sun had bleached all the colour out of the covers. And it was just like, you had those for nothing. If you'd have put 50 quid each on them, you'd have sold them like that, and that money could have gone off to the Sudan or East Timor or wherever the crisis was at that particular time, and could have been doing good work. Instead, they're there still for £275 each or whatever it was, so of that order anyway, and they're now not worth that. So you're now never going to sell them. No. You're never going to sell them. And it's just like, to me, charity shops have a duty to turn things over. I mean, I'll divorce myself from that. I don't care if I never buy another record at a charity shop as long as I live. I've got, people bring records thankfully into record fair, so I don't need to scour charity shops for records. If I never bought another one in a charity shop, that's completely fine with me, sort of thing. But it does irritate me when they, knowingly, because they get somebody in and they overprice things. It's like, you're not going to sell them at that price, and they're just, that their potential is not going to be realised. Which I think is a shame.
There's a in Wells, just 50 yards away from where you do the record fair, there's an Oxfam there.
Yeah, another one. Yeah,
selling records, selling books type Oxfam rather than like
yeah.
Came in there, they price the hell out of things, batter
Yeah,
of things for way too much.
Yeah. It's not a good development, really. I mean, I'd like to see them get, a sensible amount of money for them. I'm not saying they all ought to be out there for 50p like in the old days or whatever. If something comes in that has got a value, then they could, they could take notice of that value. But at the same time, they ought to be mindful of, well, as I just said, we need to get money off to somewhere very quickly indeed. And it's maybe better to send 50 quid now than get 75 quid for it in 2 years' time. People will have died in the meantime. It's not an exaggeration to say that. It does. It does piss me off.
I'll make sure I tag Oxfam in when we post this.
That's fine. So, I've already had several tangles with Oxfam about gigs and that as well. After the miners went back to work, so we still raised money for the miners' defence fund for a while for the court cases for victimised miners. But when that all petered out, that was sort of during the Ethiopian famine.
Okay.
And we started doing benefit gigs to raise money for the Relief Society of Tigray, because we didn't want to give or to put time into raising money for sort of corporate charities, if you like, that spend all their money on overheads and area managers and company cars and shit like that. And I saw a guy being interviewed on Breakfast TV from this Relief Society of Tigray, and what he was saying was that what they were doing was they were going into the feeding stations where people had congregated because of the famine. They were going into the feeding stations and pulling out the menfolk, taking them back to their farms, which they had to abandon because of the famine, and supporting them on the farm. They would give them food for 6 months. They give them a plough, an ox, and a seed crop so they could plant the land. And if that crop came in, their families could come back and join them on come back from the feeding stations. And they tried to alleviate the famine in that way. And I just thought that makes so much sense to me that we spent, probably more than a year raising money for those guys. And the very first one we did, I was in town doing a shop run, getting posters up in shops for that gig. And I thought, not that it ever occurred to me before for the miners' gigs or anything, but I'll go in the Oxfam shop and ask them to, it's for famine relief in Ethiopia sort of thing. I'll ask them to put a poster up. So I went in and there was the usual phalanx of old ladies sort of working in there. And I said, I've just come in. We're organising a fundraising benefit for Ethiopian famine relief, putting some bands on. And I wondered if you wouldn't mind putting the poster up in the window. So one of them stepped forward and said, oh yes, of course we will. Yes, that'll be fine. So I thought, that's great. Thank you very much. Gave her the poster. And she said, does it benefit Oxfam? So I said, no, it's for another registered charity. It's for the Relief Society of Tigray. And she said, I'm afraid we couldn't possibly put that up.
Oh, really?
And I just thought, yeah, you probably couldn't, could you? And it's just that's coloured my attitude to, Oxfam in particular, but corporate charities in general ever since. They're not necessarily interested in what they profess to be interested in. I find that pretty lamentable.
I would say that if you was to do a gig and you raised 300 quid, like, you are better off giving that 300 quid to the two-person charity, the two-person thing, definitely. Where they're just like, even if it's just a local thing, and I don't know, like a food shelter or something, some local thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than, I know Cancer Research needs the money, and I know Great Ormond Street need the money, but if you send 300 quid to Great Ormond Street, you're pissing in the ocean.
That's right.
And everyone knows Great Ormond Street needs money, and it's the kids and whatever else. But like, it's better to go local sometimes.
Or if you're going to organise a park run that might raise 20 grand, then that's the sort of thing to do for that, really, isn't it? And send off a meaningful amount of money, which, as you say, will be noticeable. So I think, smaller amounts, 2 people that's got a van that are going off to Romanian orphanages or something like that is a better use. That's 20 quid's worth of diesel.
exactly.
sort of thing. You know, it's worth having, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. It's like a bullseye with the money. You've totally hit the target.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you done any touring? This one's a record bought on tour. If you've not done touring,
Right.
holidays or however.
Right. Well, how I work this one out was I'm not in a band because I have no skill in that department whatsoever. Absolutely none. Right.
Just as an aside, I've got no skill. Anyone can be in a band.
Perhaps my lack of skill is more obvious than your lack of skill. Let's put it that. Anyway. So how I worked this out was I've picked something that I bought off a merch table at a gig from a band that was on tour.
Cool. Perfect.
So a sort of a similar thing. And this is a band that I've got a couple of their records here. This is a band that I saw in Cardiff about, probably about 3 years ago now. A Swiss band called Massacot. Extraordinary band, just very, very strange. I can't remember who the headlining band were, but I think these guys were the support. And it's fair. I find it very difficult to describe their music. It's sort of, well, it reminds me of a very skeletal mix-up of the Gang of Four and ESG.
Okay.
Really difficult to put your finger on it. Quite repetitive, quite sort of funky, but not in a funk sense. Yeah. And live, the records are great. That's the LP as well. They're both out here on a label called Harbinger Sound. There was a label that put out the early Sleaford Mod stuff. They put out some other good stuff on the label as well, but most people tend to not notice it. Really, it's not a very well known label other than for Sleaford Mods in a way. But Massacot absolutely blew me away live. They were stunning. Really, I didn't know what to expect, and I got exactly that.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
When it was over, I still didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
You know, they absolutely flummoxed me, but they were just great. Absolutely held my attention right the way through. They were awesome. 3-piece, I think, from Switzerland. I think they're from Switzerland. So I'd urge anybody with an inquiring mind to go out and just Google this stuff. I think if you get live stuff up online, you know, it's probably better than listening to the albums online. Right. I'd definitely try and see some live stuff first, and then maybe if you like it, try and seek out the album. The album should be available in sort of record shops that have got an account with Cargo Distribution. If they've got an account with Cargo Distribution, they should be able to get anything on the Harbinger Sound label. And I think those two things would probably still be on the catalogue. So yeah, well worth checking them out somewhere along the line.
Ooh, yeah. And where in Cardiff did you see them?
That was in the Moon Club. Oh yeah. Which I think you're there in November. Is that still on?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I should be there.
Free entry. Free.
For sure. I did notice that, but that's not the only reason I should be there. I did.
The following tour, we're paying people to come and see us.
Yeah, I did pay to see you at the Mars Bar in Worcester. So,
I was surprised. I was surprised to see you there. It was like,
yeah, I was surprised to see you. I didn't know you hid that one under a bushel.
Oh, really? You didn't know?
Yeah, I didn't know you were in Hey Colossus. So,
yeah, I was just a postman at the record fair, because your record fairs are on Saturdays. So I always come, but often straight after work.
Yeah, in your gear, your shorts,
I'm all dressed
red jacket, looking like a Butlin superhero.
Straight from work.
Yeah.
Oh, God damn. Yeah, no, I like the Moon. The Moon's a nice place.
Yeah, I always feel comfortable there in that.
I would say I hate the loading. And it's not. There's no stairs. It's all flat. Yeah. But man alive, the people.
Yeah, that's a busy street, isn't it?
Like I think there's like a Weatherspoons about 2 doors down.
Yeah, there is.
Club Bark or whatever the hell.
Yeah, Eva Bark. Yeah, the Welsh club.
And there's other bars and whatnot nearby. Yeah, and when you especially load out, loading out at midnight is a night.
Is there no back way in?
No. 2 years.
I think that would be stairs if there was one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you go down to the loos at the back.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hadn't noticed whether there was some crash doors there, but well.
And you know, and understandably, there's just a lot of hate for the English.
Yeah.
You get
do you know, I've never had that. I mean, obviously, you know, I sound like an Englishman. We've lived here. We've lived in Newport now for 38 years. I've never had any of that.
Yeah,
never,
I get it. I get it because you know, I hate the English.
Well, yeah, I'm quite happy to side with the Welsh. Yeah. I didn't bother watching the football today, but I did watch it yesterday. Yeah. So
I fell asleep today. So England played Croatia. I watched it like 25 minutes, fell asleep, woke up for one of our players being interviewed because he'd scored the winner. And that was it. I missed like the whole thing. I just slept through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like it was a really hot day, and I was like, oh.
Yeah. I was busy sorting out records for this, so I didn't see it at all. And to be honest, I wouldn't. You know, I'll watch the Welsh games, and you know, I've lived more than half my life in Wales now, so I feel more Welsh than I do English in a way. And you do get, living in Wales, you do get a perspective on England which English people don't get. Yeah. You know, that sort of. This is not aimed at individuals, I hope you understand, but there's a collective arrogance about the English and about what they think their position in the world is, which, you know, and the English, most of the time, try and include the Welsh and the Scottish and the Irish in that. And we don't really want that, you know, it's a slightly, subtly different mindset. Yeah. In, you know, some of these more far-flung western and northern regions, like, you know, so yeah, it's been instructive living here, sort of thing. But I've hand on heart, I've never come across any anti-English things directed at me.
Have you ever loaded a band out at the moon?
Well, having TJs, yeah, but yeah, fair play. Not in the middle of Cal. I mean, Womanby Street, where the moon is like a cattle market, sort of thing. You know, late at night for sure. Yeah, no, I don't envy you that task. Well, have you got any roadies then? I thought you might have some roadies by this stage of your career.
We're playing 3 gigs in Cardiff. There ain't no roadies. But you know, I wouldn't change it for anything because I love playing. Yeah. A record that people wouldn't think that you'd dig.
Right. Well, this is pretty left field. This is a guy called Alexis Zoumbas, a Greek guy from the 1920s, and this is an album. It's called a Lament for Eperus, 1926 to 28. And this is an album of a compilation of 78s that Greek exiles, and in particular this guy, did in New York in the obviously the mid and late 1920s. And this was Third Man, Jack White from the White Stripes label, put this out a couple of years ago. And some of it is just unbelievable. The first track, which rejoices in the title of Epireticomirology, I'm probably saying that completely wrong. It's like music from another planet, but in a very good way. There's a sort of Alexis was a violin player. So what it is basically it's him on the violin with a sort of something, I'm not quite sure what, doing a sort of quite a low level drone sort of underneath it, but this amazing sort of keening violin sort of music over the top. It just completely affecting. I mean, as I hope you can tell, music means, you know, pretty well everything to me. And every now and again you come across something like this from an unexpected quarter, and it just takes you somewhere else immediately. And this absolutely does that. You know, I'd recommend anybody to buy this. It's, while English sort of folk musicians were foldy rolling and dancing around maypoles, this guy was absolutely nailing it.
Well, you know, let's have another look at him because he looks like he's properly lamenting.
Yeah, it's a Robert Crumb drawing on the front there. Yeah. But Alexis Zoumbas,
Yeah. Is it a normal? Is it a box set or is it just like a?
It folds out 3 ways. There's some amazing sleeve notes on here as well. The reason this guy ended up in New York, apparently, so the sleeve notes go, is that immediately before this period, so after the First World War, with the decay of the Ottoman Empire, that were in charge of northern Greece. Eperus is in the northern mountainous parts of Greece. It was very, very cruelly overseen by the Ottoman Empire for hundreds of years. And when the Greeks finally won their unification battle for Greece and threw off the Ottomans, this guy, Alexis, and some other people from his village promptly marched all the Ottoman officials that had been oppressing them for decades, marched them up to the top of the gorge and pushed them all in. But then, of course, had to skedaddle pretty quickly, which is why he ended up in New York, sort of thing. So it's a pretty phenomenal story. I mean, the sleeve notes are worth the price of admission alone. So
I'm going to check it out, definitely.
I mean, the first track on side 1, just play that. It just, leaves me speechless, really. It's stunning.
Mental.
And totally different.
That's it.
Totally
That's good. That's a good pick you've done there. That's
Whoever would have thought we'd have been talking about the Ottoman Empire?
Well, we've gone from, what have we gone from? I don't know what we've gone from. We've gone from Gibby Haynes drinking food dye out of his shoe.
So there we go. So that's Alexis Zumbas then.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So last subject I have is 10-inch records. Favorite 10-inch, and your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I have several thoughts really. Speaking as a record dealer that displays records in sort of crates, they're a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Because I always put them at the front of the box. Because if you put them in between a load of 12-inch records, nobody ever sees them. But if you put them at the front, so that loosely speaking they're visible, nobody ever looks at them.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So any band that puts out a 10-inch record deliberately, to me, seems to be asking for commercial oblivion. I think it's really, they just get lost in racks.
Yeah.
So difficult. The one that I was going to say for this favorite 10-inch record, actually Anne suggested this. We were talking about this yesterday, and I was a little bit lost in advance, sort of thinking of a 10-inch. I was going to go with an Undertones promo that I've got, which is really nice. But then she reminded me about the Basement 5 10-inch. The first record they did. Do you remember them? The Basement 5? They were on Ireland. It was a band put together by a guy called Dennis Morris, who was a photographer. He did loads of really great Sex Pistols photos. He was around at that time. But he had this band together called Basement 5, and they were sort of, it's going to sound pretty dreadful, but they were sort of like a punk rock reggae hybrid. But much, much better than that sounds.
Good.
Right? Really, really sort of going for the jugular sort of thing. Really guttural and hard edged. So I'd have to say the first Basement 5 10-inch for that. I can't even remember any of the names of the tracks. I probably haven't been able to get to it on the shelf for about the last 10 years. So it's a while since I've played it. But it fits the bill really well.
This room that you can't get into. I'm intrigued by this room that you can't get into.
Yeah. Well, it's partly I've got all my stuff in there, but I've also got quite a lot of stuff from the business, overflow stuff from the business as well. Right. So that's all going to be going. The plan is for that all to go at the end of the year, sort of thing. And in which case, then I'll be able to have slightly more access to the stuff that I really want access to. You know, so there's stuff on my shelves that I haven't been able to play for years just because of the piles of stuff in front of it. You know, so I'm looking forward to being able to get to some of that stuff, including the Basement 5 10-inch, which I shall give a special play in honour of this.
So do you have any more records you have?
Yeah, I've pulled a few things out. I mean, while we're talking about 10 inches, there was this as well. This is a double 10-inch by an outfit called Trojan. It's not on the Trojan label, but this is.
Yes, go on. That label. I want to talk about that label in a second, but go on.
Oh, right, okay. So
Yeah,
this is, to me, this is like modern dancehall. This is what switched on modern British reggae heads are doing with reggae dancehall music now.
Yeah.
And it's great, absolutely stupendous. And they're sort of putting out feelers to other sort of genres as well. There's a dub chasm mix on here, and he was what genre was with I can't remember what it's called now. All the hyperdub label stuff. No, the name escapes me. But he's come from a slightly left field sort of area. Dubstep, thank you. Yeah, he's a dubstep guy, but he's come in to do a remix in this sort of dancehall stuff as well. And yeah, great, really sort of phenomenal stuff. So what were you going to say about Peng Sang then?
Well, unless I'm mistaken, I could be wrong. So just, do you know what year that record is?
No, it doesn't have any details on it. It doesn't even really sort of tell you anything at all. My recollection would be that it would be about 5 years ago, right. 2016 maybe.
Yeah, okay. I don't think it's what I think it is. That there was a chap I used to work for at SRD, and his name was Penguin, and
right.
And he was big into all of that. And I don't. If it had been a few years earlier, I wonder if he'd have had a label called that.
Right.
He went under the name of King Penguin Distribution or something, and he had like a distribution.
Well, you never know. It's a bit of a coincidence, isn't it?
It is, but I'm not sure. So I'm not going to edit this out because I don't know how to. But I'm putting it out.
I mean, mind you, it didn't come through SRD.
No.
Which you might think that if he was working there or had been working there, that he might have stayed loyal and it might have come through SRD, but it didn't. No. But that's I really like sort of people that move with the times. You know, this is stuff that is thoroughly modern, but takes as some of its ingredients, stuff from the past, that gives it a really good kick in a very respectful way, but also really taking it somewhere new, which something that I'm sort of very fond of, you know. So yeah, long may it continue.
Yeah, well, kind of like this sort of thing when they do, like, it's some of the stuff on here is like just mixing it all up and just pushing it forward. Like, this is so futuristic. Some of it. That's
right. Yeah, great, isn't it?
Yeah, I love
it. Yeah. I mean, and in a similar thing, one of the other things I pulled out just completely at random was something that came in like 2 weeks ago, which again is a sort of something that comes from the reggae world, but it's got feet in other things as well. It's a 7-inch single by a guy called Ryder Shafiq. Okay. He's done a few things with some of the offshoots from Scotch Bonnet label, the Mungo Hi-Fi sort of people. And that, and it's sort of dancehall stuff, but it's got a bit of drum and bass in there, sort of thing. And it's really, that's a kicking tune. It's a great tune. It's called When Will We Learn? Great tune. Just come out a couple of weeks ago, sort of thing. So if you can track that down, that's well worth tracking down. And he's certainly somebody I'll be keeping an eye on from now on. So I think he had a 12-inch out more or less in the same week as well, which I think might be on the Scrubber Dub label, which is one of the Scotch Bonnet offshoots,
right? Okay,
sort of thing. But that's a great modern sort of reggae record. So
you buy this in for your like shop essentially, and then
essentially I buy it in for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you keep, how much of it do you keep, and how much do you regret selling things? Like, have you got like memories of buying like 10 copies of something, selling them all, and then never getting it again, and thinking, God damn, I wish I'd kept one of them?
No, because I have something in place to stop that happening, and that is I always come first.
Right, okay.
And in the past, people have said to me, "Oh, well, that just means that there aren't any for anybody else," you know. But then what it also means is that I buy more records from my business than any of my customers, and I buy, generally speaking, a much wider range of stuff than any of my customers. Very few people would have a range that I'd find completely awe-inspiring. Some, but you know. So what it means is that when I play those records, I can recommend them to people. You know, you could go into HMV shops for a million years and nobody would ever recommend you a Ryder Shafiq 7-inch.
I know.
You know, but because I'm scouring the underground for things that appeal to me, because I still have that outlook that, you know, I don't wait for things to come from above. I wait for them to come from down below, bubbling their way up and finding me, and that's the best stuff always. So that, you know, I'm able, I like to think in some way or another that I'm able to turn people onto things that they would never have found otherwise, or maybe before they would have found out in some ways. And it's sometimes it's really weird, because I'm nearer to 70 than 60, and when you're recommending things to sort of 18-year-old kids, you know, then it's a fairly strange experience, sort of thing. But I love it. You know, whether any of these people ever take a blind bit of notice for what the doddery old fart at the record fair tells them, I got no idea. But like, a girl came into a fair in Redruth the other week, and she's about 18, came in with her dad, sort of thing, and she was asking for Bikini Kill records. So straight away, oh right, yeah, we're on the same side of the fence then. That's great. I had 3 or 4. We had to talk through it. They played for us. I was able to tell her the story about how they saved the night from Huggy Bear, who were a bunch of, well, anyway, that's another story.
Let's talk about this. I think the Huggy Bear Bikini Kill split LP is one of the greatest split LPs.
Yeah, fantastic. They're both great bands on record. Fantastic sort of thing. We had a great night. We had a big crowd in, but there, you know, there was an awful lot of hype about Huggy Bear. An awful, they were a band in some ways, I think, that contributed to that. So that people had, some people were looking to take them down, if you like.
Yeah.
And I suspect that at every gig they ever did, apart from maybe the first couple in Brighton when nobody knew who they were, they would have had people at every gig that were, you know, and the gig they did for us was no exception. There were a few people in, most of whom I knew, and most of whom I knew were sort of proper music people. They weren't people that had come from the outside, sort of thing, but they had disagreements with the band about what some of the things they were saying or how they were going about things, and they were being reasonably vocal about it. Not because it was a rotating headline tour. So one night Huggy Bear would headline, the next night Bikini Kill would headline. But at our show, Bikini Kill would headline and Huggy Bear went on first. So that they went on first, and there was some barracking from the crowd. None of it was, I'm glad to say that none of it was of that sort of personal nature that it could have been.
Right, yeah.
It was, I remember one guy just heckling them with the words "more substance" all the way through. Now, I suspect that you know as well from your experience that when people are shouting at you from a crowd, you don't always, you know, it mingles in with all the other noises that are going on. It's difficult to make out, sort of thing, and it's very easy, if there's a fair amount of it going on, to surmise that it's more hostile perhaps than it actually is.
Yeah. And
that's the position that Huggy Bear took. So they got quite belligerent with the crowd, and the crowd got got slightly more belligerent back. And at one point, John, the guy that owned TJ's, the stage in TJ's was only about a foot high. So we had to have a pretty solid front line of people at busy gigs to stop people completely overwhelming the bands and the drum kit and everything and the mics. And that was a busy night. And at one point, in between songs, I think it was, John, the owner, got up on the stage front and at the side and was walking along the stage apron right across the front, in front of the mic stands, so just pushing people back to make a bit more space, sort of thing, because it was getting pretty sort of humid down there, shall we say. So he was just pushing them back. And just at the point where he pushed somebody that he knew back like that, the bass player, I think it was the bass player, it was the only bloke in the band, turned round and saw John pushing this guy, assumed probably 15 wrong things all at once, and threw a punch at John. Well, John was built like a man mountain, right? He was half Welsh and half Seychellois, and he'd spent his life at sea.
Right, okay.
And so he was a big guy and a tough character, right, you know. And so John could have absolutely wiped the floor with this guy, but he didn't. He just got off the stage. But the band then decided that they'd had enough, even though nobody, responded to that or whatever. They stormed off, sort of thing. So people started clapping and just, giving them a bit of a hard time. The tour manager on that tour was a girl called Liz Naylor that used to work for Blast First. And I'd known her on the phone. I think that was the first gig I'd ever met her at, but I'd known her from speaking to Blast First on the phone for years and years. And so I went backstage and sort of found Liz and said, yeah, it's all sorted now. I said, everybody's like calmed down a bit, sort of thing. And, if the band want to come back, finish a set, that'd be great, sort of thing. And so, all right, okay. She said, so I'll go and find them and find out what they want to do. So off she went and came back a couple of minutes later and said, no, they're not going to finish the set. So I said, really? I said, it's not bad out there. It's like, I'd be offended if people were giving them unearned shit. That would offend me as a promoter. I wouldn't want a crowd that I've helped bring into a room to turn on a band like that. I said, it's not like that. People are being they're being noisy and leery sort of thing, but they're not being disrespectful or personal or anything like that. But the band wouldn't have it. So it's like, okay, fair enough. Then that's how it is. So Bikini Kill came on then, and they absolutely took the place apart. Yeah. And that's what Huggy Bear should have done. They should have come back mad as hell and absolutely taught us all a lesson. But they left it to Bikini Kill. Yeah. So yeah, so I've always I watched the Kathleen Hanna film a while ago, sort of thing, and I thought that was a really great piece of work. And I thought she came out of it really, really well, sort of thing. She's a really good person, and I wasn't surprised to find that out. Yeah.
So, what record did you recommend to the 18-year-old girl in Red Roof?
Oh well, she bought the Bikini Kill singles album. But funny enough, I recommended the Massacot records to her as well, because she was into sort of Babes in Toyland. She had one or two of their records, because I mentioned them as well. She was into bands that were being fronted by strong women. I think that was the background to it. She decided that she wanted to investigate that, and that's a bloody good avenue to investigate, if you ask me. The Lunatics played for us a couple of times as well, and they were tough as nails and a great band. But I recommended Massacot again because they were sort of like, I think they were 2/3 female. I think the drummer was a guy, but doing something hard-edged but different. And something that it's going to be hard. It would be hard to stumble across them. You'd have to be very lucky to stumble across them, I think. Whether she did anything with it or not, I don't know. I did say that if I saw her at the next record fair, I'd be asking questions. So I gave her some homework.
So today we're recording this on the 13th of June. This episode will probably go out in about 2 weeks' time. So towards the end of June, I think, maybe early July, sometime like that. Talk to me about what record fairs you have lined up. Can you remember how considering the world we're in now, how are we looking for July onwards?
Yeah. Well, from July onwards, not too bad. It's been difficult up to now. We managed to get a few fairs in last autumn in between lockdowns, and we've done, I think, about 4, in the last sort of month or so. Yeah. Our next one, as you've already alluded to, is the Barnstaple one this coming Saturday, and then the weekend after that, which is, I think, then the last weekend in June, we're in. I want to say Wells actually and Wantage, but I have a feeling that Wells is not. I think Wells is July the 10th, and Penarth is July the 11th. Yes, we're in Abergavenny the last Saturday in June, and Wantage the day afterwards, the last Sunday in June, and then the Isle of Wight on July the 3rd, and then Wells July the 10th. So put that one in your diary, and Penarth on July the 11th. It's, I mean, a lot of the venues we use are sort of church halls, and a lot of those are sort of run by sort of fairly elderly people that have been perhaps understandably a little bit cautious about reopening. Right, yeah. So we've got 1 or 2 of our venues that aren't going to reopen until I think 1 or 2 in August, and even 1 in September. So we're going to be losing the occasional bit of work, but I think from now on, I'm hoping that the majority of our fairs can go ahead. But if people check our Tumblr page, you'll get the up-to-date info on there.
Rockaway Record Fairs, go for it.
Rockaway Record Fairs, the very same, yes.
Yeah, I would have worn my T-shirt, but I spoke to previous 2 episodes ago. I wore the Rockaway T-shirt.
Well done, mate.
Again, I can't keep wearing it.
No, indeed, of course not. No. There are other T-shirts to be worn too.
Do that, yeah. What have I got? I've got look at this person. He's cutting his head open.
Oh right, yeah.
It's
I don't recognise that one.
It's
I feel like that sometimes.
Amel and the Sniffers stuff. What's it say on the back? Tell me what it says on the back.
Right, okay. Vinyl finery for vagabonds.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah,
that's the label. It's the label that did the early Amel and the Sniffers stuff. Anyway, I know that.
Right, good shirt, good shirt. So,
it was really good to talk to you.
Well, really interesting. Thanks for asking me. Really good to talk to you as well. As I said, I've pulled out a pile that's far too big as well. So we'll have to do a part 2 sometime or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, look at the ratings first.
Oh, don't worry. But no, it's it's really good, and some splendid stories, and yeah, I had other records here that I didn't show that you'd put gigs on for. So I realised that it was going on.
Yeah, I said you'll have trouble to shut me up. I mean, what I occasionally say to people, I've done a couple of interviews about the gigs, sort of mainly, and I often say to people that you do realise that if you came back tomorrow and asked me exactly the same questions, you'd get completely different answers.
Yeah.
So beware of that.
I was annoyed, actually. One of the records I was desperately looking for all afternoon was the Action Swingers album.
Oh yeah.
Because I saw you put them on with the Love Blobs.
Yeah, Love Blobs.
I saw that tour. I saw that tour as well in Aylesbury.
Right, Action Swingers were great. That's another guy, Ned Hayden, the singer from Action Swingers. He's another guy that took a swing at John, the club owner, and John just put him on the floor. So,
okay. One final question.
Go for it.
One final question.
Let me draw the curtains. It's getting a bit gloomy in here, isn't it?
Yeah.
If that's any better. Yeah.
One final question, right. And that is bands that these people either won't watch this, so don't worry, or they've split up or whatever. So don't worry. Feel free. Bands that suck as people.
Yeah.
As people.
Yeah. Very, very few indeed. I'm very glad to say. There's really, 3 I think that spring to mind. So if I do them in the order that we put them on, the first one was Pot Will Eat Itself.
Okay.
Who were just a bunch of dicks, basically, and we ended up getting in a fist fight with them because they wouldn't go on stage. The story that they never knew about their gig was that at the time we did it, we were doing gigs upstairs in a big bar at Newport Centre. It's a big room, and there were more costs. It was in between the Stour Labour Club and TJ's, and there were more costs involved to us for using a room like that. We had to get a bigger PA in. They charged us for the room, which we hadn't been charged for at either TJ's or the Stowe Hill. So there were costs involved. So actually, this leads on to several other stories. So you're going to have to edit this, I think. One of only 2 real regrets that I have about the gigs. One of them was that we had a Minutemen gig booked for February the 29th, 1986.
Oh.
It was a leap year. And of course, Dee Boone, their singer, was killed in a car crash in America over the Christmas period, a couple of months beforehand. So obviously that never happened. I never got to see the Minutemen, who were one of my favourite bands. And that's one of the real regrets, that we didn't do that Minutemen gig. We weren't able to do that. However, The upside was that we got offered the UK's first fire hose gig, which was the 2 remaining members of the Minutemen with a new singer. So we gleefully accepted the invitation to do that, but we reckoned that we wouldn't be able to headline them in the venue that we had at Newport Centre.
Just before we go any further, you're not going to tell me Pop Will Eat Itself played with a fire hose, are you?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go on.
I am. Yeah. Well, and the Darling Buds played with the Butthole Surfers the second time as well.
What?
Used to love that. Yeah. So it was also, but we were casting around looking for somebody basically to carry the gig economically. The gig for us was always a fire hose gig. That was where our hearts were. But we cynically and most unusually for us needed something to make it work economically. Right. And we got offered Pop Will Eat Itself. So we thought, yeah, okay, all right, we'll go for that. And they turned up and everything was sort of going reasonably well. And I think it may have come across to them during their time in Newport that perhaps quite a lot of people that were coming to the gig were there to see fire hose and not them. And they got just gradually more tetchy for no good reason, sort of thing. So Fire Hose played an absolute stormer, and you know the audience was eating out of their hands. It was a really, really great night, sort of thing. And Newport Centre was the only gig really where we had hard and fast curfew times. The Stowe Labour Club didn't care. John, TJ, for the most part, didn't care. But Newport Centre was on the button. They would turn the power off if you overran, sort of thing. So we had a responsibility to make sure that the gigs ran absolutely to time, sort of thing. And it was running perfectly well. Fire Hose finished on time. There was a, 15, 20 minute gear changeover, which went fine, sort of thing. And then it was Pop Will Eat Itself stage time. And they were sat in a group off to the side of the stage. So I went up and I said, okay, guys, it's, your stage time, like in your own time, sort of thing, So it was like, yeah, sort of thing. So I went back down the front, waiting for him to come on. Nothing happened. 5 minutes went by. So I went back and said, it's just your stage time. It'd be beneficial to do it now rather than later, sort of thing. So I got the same sort of nonchalant response. Went back, they didn't come back on. So I went back a third time and said, look, they will turn the power off on you at 12 o'clock, whether your set is finished or not. You wanted 45 minutes and it's now 11:30. So you're already in a bit of trouble here. Can you get on now? There's people out there, waiting to see you, sort of thing. And they started on me then. Yeah, we'll go on when it pleases us, and all this sort of rock star bullshit, sort of thing. So it's like, okay, I've already had my gig. Yeah. I've seen Fire Hose. You guys can get back in the van for all I care. So and they came on about 5 minutes after that, sort of thing. And one of the guys that was doing the gigs with us was absolutely incensed by their behavior. Okay. So he was down the front with me, and is it Clint, the singer, came up on the microphone, and this guy Pete just started on him. You fucking wanker, you fucking hippie fucking wanker. And Clint did what you should never, ever do. Can you guess what it is?
Well, did he reply?
Come up here and say that.
Oh.
Well, of course, Pete got up on the stage and said it to his face, right? And at this point, one of their roadies, who was still off at the side of the stage, ran across the stage and did a fantastic flying drop kick at Pete, missed him completely, went sailing off into the audience and got a hiding for his trouble. and a fist fight started. Yes. Eventually they did start playing, I think, to try and put an end to the fisticuffs. Yeah. But yeah, that was the Pop Will Eat Itself story. Ugh, yeah, they were, they were like, I don't know, maybe they were just kids or whatever, I don't know, but they just, it was a totally different, yeah, that was, they shouldn't have been playing the gig, really.
No, this is 86.
Yes, I think it was 86. Yeah, it would have been maybe the summer of 86 or late 86, something around about there.
There's about three about 1990, Pop itself got pretty big, didn't they?
Yeah. They were still being marketed as a Grebo band when we had it. Do you remember Grebo?
Yeah,
one of the enemies things like.
Yeah. God damn. Yeah.
And Clint now, of course, is a huge soundtrack and film and TV music writer in America. Clint Mansell, very well known, and of course Fuzz Townsend does Car SOS on Channel 5 or whatever it is. He was actually the nicest of a lot of them.
Okay.
He was the only one that was trying to calm things down, and that. Yeah.
So, okay, noted. He's the good guy.
Yeah, he's the better one of them. Yeah.
Go on.
And
number 2.
It would be the Swans.
Oh, yeah.
Swans. Yeah, it was a weird one. We left ourselves open to it in a way. They were then on a label called Product Inc., which was run by a guy called Rob Collins, who I knew a bit. Again, had never met him, but I knew him off the telephone. I think we'd done bands of his before, I think, in some way or another. And he phoned up and offered us the Swans. And I allowed myself to be bullied by him into working out their fee on a sellout basis. Because he was saying, oh, they'll sell out. This was in TJ's. There's no doubt about it. They'll sell out. So he bullied me, and I capitulated, I have to admit, to working out what the capacity was, what the ticket price was, and what the fee would be. Right. So I can't remember now what the fee was, but I want to say £600, but that sounds very little. But that's what my memory's telling me. Anyway, so what happened was we promoted the gig just as we promoted all our other gigs, sort of thing. Most of which have been successful in some way or another. But we used to keep, one of the things we did very early on was we used to keep what we called a slush fund. Right. So that if a gig made money, we basically used to give it to John from TJ's and he'd keep it for us. And that was a fund, so that if a gig didn't make it, we had some funds to draw on, so the bands always got paid. Because I expect that most of the time, if a band or a promoter doesn't get enough people in, it's the band that doesn't get paid. That's usually how it works.
There's a drip down effect, and the band is last.
Yeah. So to try and ameliorate that, we have this slush fund sort of thing. So despite our best efforts at getting people into that gig, we had a very, very poor turnout. I can't remember now whether there were mitigating factors like, I don't know, like a Welsh Rugby International, or it was snowing or whatever. I can't remember, but we had a disappointingly poor performance, a poor turnout. So the band were all right. They were one of those bands that were fairly self-contained. They kept themselves to themselves. They weren't outgoing like Barney from Napalm Death was, or Scott from Girls Against Boys. They weren't interested in having that intercourse with anybody in particular. They were there to do a job, and they do the job, and then they go, and then it would be somebody else somewhere else tomorrow. It was that sort of vibe. So at the end, we worked out what money there was, and there wasn't enough money to pay them their fee, never mind the PA or support bands. Right. So what we did was, there were about 6 of us involved in Cheap Sweaty Fun at that time. So we literally all emptied our pockets, every penny we had, put it into the kitty sort of thing, and we were still short by about 50 quid. So before we went to see the band, we got our heads together and said, right, well, what we'll do is, the band, we knew the Swans were over for about a fortnight. We'll organise a disco in a week's time. We'll easily raise 50 quid and we'll send them the 50 quid on. Right. We'll do that sort of thing. We went to see the support bands and the PA guy, and we said to the PA guy, right, well, we'll have to pay you next time. And we said to the support bands, right, we can either pay you after we've done another couple of gigs, or if you don't mind waiting maybe a bit longer, we'll give you a really good gig, which is going to pull a lot of people, and you'll get more than the 50 quid. We always used to do that. If a band pulled sort of 300 or 400 people, and support bands were on 50 quid, we never used to just give them 50 quid. If there was that amount of money swimming around, they always had a share of it as well, sort of thing. Right. So then let's say it was 600 quid the fee for the Swans. we had 550 quid and a plan in place.
Mm.
So Michael Guyer was at the bar with his Stetson and a cigar and a pair of shorts and cowboy boots and no top on, cutting quite a character. He's quite a big sort of guy.
Yeah.
So I went up and said, "Oh, Michael, can we talk about money? We need to talk about the money," sort of thing. And he was very dismissive. I can remember him standing there, and he waved me away like this and just said, "Go and see Westberg. Go and see Westberg. You know, he looks after all that side of things." So it was like, well, I could have done without this, but so Westberg was upstairs with Jarbo. So we went upstairs, and we said to Westberg, "All right, well, Michael sent us up to sort the money out of you. Is that right?" So he said, "Yeah." So we got a diary out, and he was writing, you know. So I said, "Right, well, the bottom line is we're not going to be able to pay you what we agreed to pay you tonight." So he said, "Well, all right." He was pissed off about it. Fair enough. So he said, "Well, what have you got?" So I said, "Well, we've got 550. So we've emptied our pockets literally, and you know, this, that, and the other. But you know, but we've got this plan in place. We'll get you the money before you go back to the States. We'll send it off to Rob at Product Inc. and he can sort it out with you. We've already made arrangements to do that, and we'll hand on heart, we will do that sort of thing." So he was writing it down in his diary, and Jarbo was chewing her cheek on a sofa. And I'll never forget, it was like it was tape loop. She was going, "No, you guys are so naive. You guys are so naive. You guys are so naive," over and over like a broken record. It was like, in the end, I turned to her and I said, "It's a fucking good job we are this naive, because we wouldn't have agreed to 600 quid otherwise." Because we later found out that their next gig was at the Free Butt in Brighton, which they'd done on a door deal. So it was like we got taken for a ride. Don't mind that, you know, but under those circumstances, sort of thing. Just a little. And at this point, Michael Guyer walked in, and Westberg just said, "These guys can't pay us," and he absolutely exploded, went absolutely ballistic. I'm an artist," and it was like, it was all of this, and I was trying to calm him down, to say what we'd put in place. You know, that's not, we can't pay you anything. You've got 550 of your £600, and we've got a plan in place to raise you the other 50, which we'll send on to Rob before you go home. So you'll get the money before you go home. He wouldn't have any of it. He was absolutely railing. And at one point, we didn't used to finish gigs then till 1 o'clock in the morning. This was about 2:30, 2:45. And he was saying to us, "Well, you've got to get in a taxi. You've got to go around to 10 of your friends and borrow £5 each off them." And I said, we literally all stood there with our pockets pulled out like elephant ears, like, you know. I said, "We've put every penny. We haven't got the taxi fare. And secondly, how many friends do you think we'd have that we could knock up at 2:45 in the morning and borrow a fiver off them? You know, don't be ridiculous. We've already put a plan in place." And he was going on and on and on. And in the end, I just said, "I'll tell you what then, fuck you and fuck your £50. I just had enough," like, you know. And in the end, we didn't bother raising the 50 quid, which I think we should have done. I think no.
You're right.
You know,
You're right not to. It turns out he's a bit of a wrong in anyway. So, like,
yeah,
don't, like, I wouldn't beat yourself up over that. I wouldn't have paid him any of the money. Tell him to stick to New York or wherever he come from.
it was a learning experience. We never allowed ourselves to be talked into a fee that we weren't anything other than comfortable with. I mean, we very often used to say to people, if we got offered a band for 500 quid that we really wanted to do, say 500, and we thought that was maybe more for a guarantee than we wanted to afford, we'd say something like, "Well, look, we've got very, very low overheads indeed," sort of thing. I mean, most promoters screw bands on the overheads. You know, I've seen the figures. I've seen the MCP figures and all that sort of stuff. I know it goes on. I can tell you another story about that if you want, but anyway, not for this one. We'll pay you £300, but we'll give you 100% over costs. We're not interested in making a penny out of this ourselves, and especially under the circumstances where we're asking you to play for less for a guarantee. We're quite happy to give you 100%, so every penny that the gig raises over agreed costs. sort of thing. And very often bands would go with that, and they'd walk away with maybe £700. You know, it was, and then under those circumstances, bands would trust you and they'd come back, sort of thing. Because all right, maybe the London gig. I mean, you talk to bands like the Vandals, always used to pull really good crowds for us in Newport. We used to pay them double than they get at London gigs.
Yeah, well, there's certain places in the country that we do better. Like we do better in Nottingham than we do anywhere else, because the promoters there. I mean, one of the promoters is now in the band, but before he was in the band, he was in the band, we always knew that Nottingham was a good one for us. They weren't in it to make money. The money went to the right places. You know, and so bands know where to go. You soon sort it out, don't you? Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that most bands, within 5 minutes of within 5 minutes of meeting the promoter, and of course you don't always meet the promoter as a band, do you? You know, within 5 minutes you pretty well know how it's going to end up, don't you? So so here's our thing: is people who know me or know the band know this story quite well, because I've probably either told it too many times or whatever. It's a promoter story. Colossus play with Harvey Milk in Bristol.
Oh, right, yeah.
About 2013. Okay, so Harvey Milk, quite a big band. It's at the
Exchange.
Which one?
Exchange.
No, it wasn't the Exchange, but this is before.
Police.
No, fuck, what's it called? You've said the name of the place, the Croft.
Oh yeah.
It was, and so we hire a van to get to this gig from London to go and play with Harvey Milk. The gig is sold out. Get to the end of the night. The promoter's not there. It's like it's being run by a Bristol company, but a Brighton company, sorry. And it's they've sent a sort of a skivvy representative along or whatever.
Plenipotentiary.
Whatever they're called, whatever. And I go at the end of the night. I said, "Oh, nice one, cheers. Can we talk about money or whatever?" And I really hate talking about money, so the whole thing's a total fright fest for me. And they give us 15 quid.
Bloody hell, really?
Yeah.
That's outrageous, isn't it?
It caused a bit of a rumpus for a few years. You know, and it developed as a story as well, and it was
well, given that we started doing gigs in 1984 and finished in 2007, no band ever left a gig of ours with less than £50. It's like occasionally, I think it was, I can't remember whether it was the first or second time that No Effects played for us. The Offspring were a £50 support band.
Wow.
On tour with them, £50 sort of thing, you know. We had a decent crowd for them, and there were a lot of people that turned up to see the Offspring. They just begun to make a few waves before any of the chart stuff or anything. They were just starting to make it as an underground punk band, and we ended up paying them £275, and they were like, "What?" They couldn't believe it, you know. So that somebody had willingly given them £275 instead of £50. You know, we always used to love doing that, you know.
Yeah, it's lessons you learn, and then you just don't use those promoters again, and plus they don't want to use you again either, because the whole thing's just so damn ugly.
I mean, I suppose part of it is that people don't realise how much money it costs to be in a band. You know, you try replacing a set of bass strings or like a bass drum or a pedal, or you know, stuff like that. It costs money, and your rehearsal space costs you money, and you know, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So who's the third?
Right. Shall I put the light on? Am I getting a bit dim?
Fine, I like it. It's murky now. We're getting murky stuff.
Well, this was a band. This was a band that we had to take. It's quite a strange story in a way, because the band that we wanted, that meant we had to have this band headlining, was Fallout Boy, who had actually played for us before as a third on the bill, 50 quid. I can't remember. They came over with, it wasn't No Effects, but it was a band like that sort of thing. And we got on with them really well. They were really nice people. They were very happy. They were going around chatting, and it was, you know, nice experience meeting them, and they were good. So they were coming back with a band called Mest, M-E-S-T. And so it was like, okay, we heard one or two not complimentary stories about Mest, but we thought, well, Fall Out Boy are touring with them, so, and I got time for them, so maybe it's not as bad as, you know. And people were always giving you bullshit stories about, oh, Poison Idea will just beat you to a pulp, and like Anti-Scene are complete animals, and this, that, and the other. And they were lovely people, fantastic. So I tended to sort of disregard those sort of grapevine type stories, negative stories about bands. So we booked the show in, and coincidentally, it turned out to be our 300th show. And when we hit a big number like that, like 100 or 200, or in this case 300, we always tried to make more of it. So I think that the 100th show was the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, DOA, Therapy, and the Cowboy Killers. And everybody that came in had a carrier bag with a record that we made, and a T-shirt. And in the 100th, we had sticks of punk rock. We actually went to a seaside rock manufacturer in Blackpool, and we had sticks of rock with punk rock written through it. And you had one of those in your bag, and there was loads of like flyers, anti-apartheid flyers, and it was like a goodie bag, I suppose, in some ways. So, and then the 200th one, we did a similar thing. There was a T-shirt, there was a record which we made with a track on by all the 4 bands that were playing that evening, a T-shirt, and a book with this. That was Cheap Sweaty Fun 200. So it was a book with the 200 posters in it.
Oh, nice.
And loads of other bits and bobs and all that as well, sort of thing, you know. But the 300th one, it only came together at the last minute, and we didn't really have time to work on a goodie bag. So it was a little bit like an anticlimax. And also, although it was good to have Fall Out Boy back again, messed with this unknown quantity. So I won't say we felt uncomfortable with them from the get-go, but it wasn't something that we were immensely looking forward to, like say the Boss Tones or the Misfits had been on the previous big ones. So anyway, Fall Out Boy played, and they were great. They played really, really well, and we didn't have a great crowd in, to be honest. I think because Mest, although they were headlining, were much less well known, I think. And they came on, and their singer was a complete arsehole. There was a few sort of like younger sort of girls there, sort of 14 to 16, and he was making really inappropriate remarks to them off the stage and everything. And I was that far away from just turning his mic off, disconnecting his mic or whatever. He was a real arsehole, and it left a bad taste in the mouth. And I had a word with Fall Out Boy afterwards, and I said, why are you touring with these guys? That guy's a complete arsehole, you know. He's a shit human being, as you know, and he's in a shit band as well, to make it even worse. And they was in, yeah, we're not really sure really why we are. We're regretting it as well. So I said, well, you're welcome back here anytime. I said, but those guys are never stepping foot over the threshold again. That's for sure. So yeah.
God damn.
So there you go. But yeah, I mean, out of 320 odd gigs, that's probably 1,000 bands.
Yeah.
And that is the sum total of 3.
Yeah. So Pop Will Eat Itself, you suck. Swans, you suck. And whoever the hell Mess Star, who I've never heard of actually, you suck. Yeah.
But as I say, the ratio is so small that it becomes totally unimportant.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
Really, I'm glad to say. And because as I say, we used to vet the support acts rigorously as well. And even then, we very rarely just thought, well, who are we going to get to fill that cap? There was always a waiting list of bands that we wanted to see, even to go first on in a 3 or 4 band bill. You know, there was always a list of bands ready to go, you know, and great local bands as well, you know, that would step in if we needed them to, and that, you know, great. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to have to say goodbye now.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, it's been a joy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. And I look forward to. I'll see you in Wells in.
Yeah, I dare say about 12:15 or something. Is it? Finish
work.
at 12 and.
Yeah, I'll be in my uniform.
Yeah. I'll be in mine as well, but you know, a slightly different one perhaps. So
what I'm going to do is I'm going to press stop. We can wave goodbye, and then I'll press stop. But we can say goodbye properly afterwards.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Nice one. See you
Well,
later. Bye bye.
Thanks very much. Really enjoyed it.